Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1276 of the War News Stream. And we've gotten very big news today that Ukraine is warning Belarus against launching an invasion into Ukraine amidst the fears of the Zapad exercises. We're also hearing of shots fired on the North Korean border, and also a massive drone attack underway yet again, targeting Russian oil specifically. We have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world as major significant developments have been evolving in most areas of every single corner of the world in terms of news coverage, especially inside of East Asia and Eastern Europe. Speaking on the situations in Eastern Europe first, we have been able to hear that the armed forces of Ukraine have conducted concerted counteroffensives near to the area of the Russian front lines directly to the south of the city of Pokrovsk, and have been able to push the Russian Federation within the course of 24 hours back nearly a half mile to a mile in some directions away from the city and further down towards the villages of Shevchenko and Lysivka, once again entirely resetting the defensive line for the Ukrainian armed forces and forcing the Russian Federation to go through another multi-months-long grueling battle to even reach the outskirts of the city of Pokrovsk again. We have also been able to hear that the armed forces of Ukraine and the president of Ukraine have issued a direct threat to the Republic of Belarus that any attempts to move their armed forces towards the area of the Ukrainian border during the Zapad 2025 military exercises will be met with swift military action, meaning that the Ukrainians may conduct a counterattack into Belarus if they see such a development or action taking place by the Belarusians. While at the same time we've been hearing that, we have been able to hear near to the area of the Korean DMZ that South Korean forces opened fire over the course of the day against North Korean People's Army forces near to the area of the demilitarized zone after these forces were said to have crossed the demarcation line in that area while trying to set up more boom boxes on the order of Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un. We are generally understanding that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has now issued an official threat to South Korea, stating that any further actions against the Korean People's Army within the area of the demilitarized zone will result in harsh counteractions by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, most likely a return fire will be issued by North Korean command, meaning that there may be a extended artillery battle or infantry battle near to the area of the DMZ, in short, a border skirmish. We have also been able to hear at the same time that the North Koreans are now finally repatriating some of their dead who died during the Kursk offensive in the latter part of last year, making a large spectacle about it, and also releasing to the North Korean public today a special documentary that was made about the involvement of the Korean People's Army and the Korean People's Army's expeditionary force that was sent into the area of the Kursk Oblast to participate in the Russian Battle of Kursk. We have also been able to see outside of that news that a major railway bridge under construction in Qinghai in China rapidly collapsed today, resulting in the death of 12 workers, as it does appear that Chinese steel is not up to the kind of grade nor quality that many would have expected it to be, according to Chinese propaganda. It does appear that Chinesium is on the menu. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear I tried to do that as deadpan as possible.
Sorry.
You laughing made me start laughing, man. I did that as deadpan as I could, and you absolutely broke me. I was like, you know what? That was actually pretty good. Outside of that, we have been able to hear in the Islamic Republic of Iran that they are now going to be cutting subsidies or generally state pensions to several million citizens inside the country, while at the same time they are now declaring an Islamic NATO with Pakistan, or at least trying to pursue that option. We have also been able to hear that the Iranians have stated that they have opened weapon factories within multiple countries outside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, although they have not spoken to where those factories have been opened or what exactly they are producing. Nevertheless, the Yemeni Houthis did conduct drone and missile attacks against the state of Ukraine, with all being intercepted, and the Israelis are now publicly stating that they are preparing for air campaigns and operations against the Yemeni Houthis within the area of western Yemen. We have also been able to hear outside of that the Russian Federation is continuing to come under Ukrainian drone attacks overnight, with significant damage being heard of around the area of Krasnodar and the area of the Optic refinery, while a major drone base was also attacked in Crimea. Ukrainian armed forces have been able to hold their lines today, although the significant decrease in the losses seen in the casualty reports are suggesting that Russian offensive tempos are beginning to decrease rapidly in the face of stern Ukrainian resistance. We have a massive load of news to cover today, and these are just the big points. These are not even all the little points that we have to cover today inside the United States and elsewhere around the world. But of course, today is another fairly significant news day, and we are going to be making sure to get into each and every single bit of detail that we can on all of the major news developments, and we also have some exciting updates on some upcoming projects that will be released soon here on the channel that we'll be talking about later on in air tonight. But beyond that, it is time for us to get on into the major news. And starting off, we will be moving directly into Ukraine, as we have been able to hear that the state of Ukraine has issued an official threat to the Republic of Belarus about the possibility of Belarusian armed forces moving towards the area of the Ukrainian border during their upcoming West 2025 military exercises. Ukraine has officially recommended Belarus not to approach the borders and not to provoke the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the state of Ukraine, we warn Minsk against reckless provocations. We advise you to remain prudent. This, in diplomatic speak, means do not get near the border. We will shoot any Belarusian soldiers that get near the border. So it does appear that at the moment, the Ukrainians are already putting it out quite clearly that anything that even aligns to a attempt by the Russians, or the Belarusians for that matter, to open up a new offensive near to the Ukrainian border will most likely be met immediately by Ukrainian counterattacks while those forces are attempting to organize, completely discombobulating them and also resulting in significant losses and the complete lack of cohesion, or more so the morale of these units, pretty much stopping that offensive from happening on Ukrainian soil and instead making a defensive battle happening on Belarusian soil. We have also been able to hear, as an extent of this, the Ukrainians are not necessarily joking around about this sort of a threat. As we were able to hear over the course of the past 24 hours, Ukrainian armed forces have not only been able to liberate around 6 settlements around the area south of Pokrovsk, but have also been able to inflict a decent amount of territorial loss onto the Russian Federation as a whole. This is the area around Lysivka and Shevchenko. This is something that is incredibly significant to point out. The Ukrainians are starting to retake ground to a pretty significant degree, and not only that, have solidified their defensive positions at Lysivka. This is an incredibly important development, considering the fact that Lysivka and Shevchenko are generally considered to be important parts of the defensive chain, and considering the fact that the Ukrainians are now starting to once again exert direct pressure onto the Russian offensive efforts at Shevchenko, it's becoming incredibly clear that Russian offensive efforts may not be able to survive for long within this area, and Russian forces will most likely have to resort to the defensive, as Ukrainian forces now appear to have the overwhelming superiority on the battlefield, at least in this temporary time frame, and are able to actually start pushing counterattacks against the weakened Russian forces that have been conducting an offensive on the city for roughly 3 weeks without a break. This is something that is starting to become a little bit important to note, as we also are seeing that not only are the Russians losing ground within this area, it seems as though they have already lost 6 key settlements near to the south of the city of Pokrovsk that could have been used as anchor points for further offensives to try and reach the E50 highway and technically encircle the city of Pokrovsk by cutting it off from reinforcements and supplies from the greater outside Ukrainian world. These villages have been lost, and Ukrainian armed forces have been able to successfully retake them, meaning that the Russians have been pushed back, at least in terms of effort, 6 months over the course of about 24 hours. If it goes the same pace that it took the first time, it's highly likely that the Russian Federation will have to take another 6 months, and most likely about 30,000 killed, to be able to retake these 6 villages and put themselves into a somewhat threatening posture against the city of Pokrovsk and the Ukrainian garrisons that are found inside of the city. Outside of that, we have been able to get a decent amount of combat footage showing that the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to cause decent and significant casualties against the Russian Federation's armed forces around the area of the city of Pokrovsk, including this video made by the 68th Jaeger Brigade showing a Russian taking a leap of faith off of a vehicle that was attempting to drive down one of the roads near Selidove. We can see here the drone of the 68th chasing down the Buhanka, and we can see them trying to make a run for it, but it appears that they decide not to make a run, but a leap of faith.
That's got to leave a mark right there. That's a bad hit right there. It looks like they're going about like 40 miles an hour at least, so yeah, that guy's going to have some dirt burn.
I don't think he got dirt burn. I think he got drone burn instead. The drone ran right into him, not the vehicle. So not really a good day for him. I think he's going to have to try and walk that one off. Outside of that, we also are able to see near to the area of the city of Mirnorad, which is generally considered, at least from what we would say on the channel, something of a suburb of the city of Pokrovsk, or almost a sister city just a mile to the east. We were able to see that the Ukrainian forces of the Phoenix, or specifically the Ukrainian Border Guard Regiment Phoenix, were targeting and destroying Russian vehicles carrying around towed artillery pieces. These vehicles are vital, along with their artillery pieces, in providing fire support for the Russian infantry that are continuing their defensives, at least at the moment, against the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The fact that the Russians are starting to lose these artillery pieces that are closest to the line most likely means that Russian fire missions are being suppressed and largely destroyed at the moment, and that the Russians are in an even worse off defensive position due to the lack of directed fire support. Because of this, we also would assume that the Russian Federation will most likely be having to divert more artillery forces into the area, or may see a complete lack of them, meaning that offensive and defensive abilities may be hindered due to their lack of greater artillery support, a fairly important thing, especially in any modern war. Moving on outside of that, we also were able to see an additional clip from the area of Pokrovsk, closer to the area of the former Lost Battalion, which as of today, we are generally declaring completely destroyed, as we have not been able to get any updates on the Lost Battalion from this point. We heard that they had apparently started to flee, well, the remnants of the battalion, towards Kursk, but it appears that we have not been able to get any additional updates or news about that company and a half to 2 companies that was running north towards Kursk from this point on, which generally would mean that they've most likely been destroyed, and that's why there is a lack of information at this point, is because the remnants of the company have quite literally disintegrated and scattered off around the surrounding countryside, and the only sort of activities that the Ukrainians are involved in that area, or specifically the 93rd, is most likely prisoner collection. Or these Russians are quietly flooding, one after the other, back into the Russian lines, although their battalion that they were once a part of has been destroyed entirely, even on paper. We've also been able to hear at the same time that there has been continued fighting around the area of Shikove, which was conducted today by the Timur Special Operation Forces of the GUR, which is generally the Ukrainian Delta Force is the best way to say it.
I love those new drone robots they've got that are like mechanized helpers. They have the versions that actually carry stuff, carry storage for the Ukrainians, and carry the supplies into the battlefield. And then they have the ones with the machine guns on top. It's pretty versatile how that works.
It is insanely versatile, and not only that, it ensures that the squad machine gunner position is incredibly safe, as there is not a machine gunner actually controlling the machine gun in person to be fired back at. If anything, it's only a drone, meaning that the squad is either able to augment its fire support in terms of suppressing fire from their light machine guns by an additional person without another person being present on the battlefield, or they are able to completely phase out the machine gunner role itself and replace it with the drone machine gunner instead. Either way, it is improving the squad's abilities to fight on the battlefield without taking significant casualties or increasing their firepower.
Truly another first from Ukraine, by the way. Really haven't seen that anywhere else except for in this war, so quite interesting. They're really innovating multiple different fronts.
Yeah, it really is. Oh my, did he just throw in a mortar round? And look at this. He threw in a mortar round.
Oh my God, he really did. He just had a whole mortar in his hands.
Bro, that is a 120 millimeter high explosive mortar shell. He just chucked in. Look at this. And then they got it from the... That looked insane, honestly. That looked silly. But when you see him running off...
How did it detonate, though? Because when you drop it in the mortar tube, it obviously makes contact, so that's what ignites it. So what ignited it here?
It looks like they had some sort of a fuse attached to the front. Notice all the tape? I think they had some sort of a fuse attached to the front of the shell, which kind of... I wouldn't know how the delay works, but I guess it would detonate the mortar shell much like a fuse would have normally, but it had some sort of a delayed timer on it. I have never seen this before, folks, in the whole war, ever in my life. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. But it was effective. Look at that. I mean, he tossed it in, he went running for the hillside, and then the entire basement was taken out. So it was effective.
That is a short fuse, too. That guy had, like, I think 5 seconds to get away from that thing. That is very short.
Yeah, it was like a standard grenade fuse, but it's not a standard grenade. It's a freaking 120 millimeter mortar. It's way more powerful. You would think it'd have a longer fuse, but I guess they're still concerned that if it had a longer fuse, the Russians would just grab it and try and fling it back out. So it still has something around a standard 3 to 5 second fuse. Insanely dangerous, though, because that thing has quite the blast radius and quite the explosive mass behind it with a 5-second fuse. We can also see them continuing to advance through the reeds and also completely leveling a building in one hit. I don't know what they hit that with, though, whether it was a drone or an artillery shell. It's unclear. We can also see this man here in the video operating an RPG, specifically an RPG-7, as he tries to line it up on a Russian position through the thickets and take a pot shot at it really quickly. We see them yelling out that there's an FPV around the area. And who the hell is this? Oh, it's a Russian. He surrendered. I didn't even see him there the whole time. Where the hell did he come from, dude? He just came crawling out of the ground nearly. But there goes another prisoner.
Man, look, they're taping Gollum up. They say, "Come here, Gollum," and they're not no more vision for you. You're gonna have to like get the blinders on you. Honestly, though, I would say Gollum needs to be watched. This guy came out of a bush, literally invisible like a ghoul. So I mean, this guy's a doozy.
Dude, he came out and he said, "Is a bird in one hand with a Russian in the bush?" And they were like, "I don't know, but you're a prisoner now." Honestly, bro, that is crazy. Let's see. I guess he came out of that small hole right there in the bush. I don't see him at all the whole clip, but there he is. He just pops out.
In this case, one Russian in the bush is not worth two because they got to get what they get.
Is a Russian in the bush worth the Merchant of Death? No. But anyways, we can see
U.S. government said yes. Trade them now.
But we can see them continuing to fight the Russian forces within this area. This is just to the east of Mirnoprat, by the way, just to let y'all know exactly where this is on film. And that's generally the end of the clip as they show one of the Russian wounded telling his comrades to surrender because it's not really worth fighting the Ukrainians. But we also get to see well behind the lines, way back around Ukrainsk, a fiber optic drone of the 3rd Battalion of the 25th Brigade actually landing an effective hit against a Russian vehicle. Fiber optic drones have started to be used heavily by both sides. It's been found out that these are completely impervious to the normal kinds of electronic warfare interference that has plagued earlier wireless drones in the past. For this reason, both the Russians and the Ukrainians have started to adopt fiber optic drones in larger numbers, and the Ukrainians have started to implement these wherever they find electronic warfare interference only, meaning that they're able to relegate the use of these somewhat more expensive and fragile drones to areas where they're needed the most, while using wireless drones elsewhere. And we can see that the hit was effective there. The vehicle is now on fire, and most likely the crew of the vehicle has also gone up with the vehicle.
It's quite interesting that the first sign of full broadband fiber that the Russians will ever have is the fiber optics from the Ukrainian drones. It's kind of a sad day. Maybe one day when they clean this whole thing up, they can use those fiber optic cables to install some brand new high-speed internet.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, that'd be an improvement for them all. I bet they've never heard of something like that. But we can see this drone also finding a Russian position and diving down right into it, hitting the artillery piece. It appears that it was most likely a D-20 and knocking it out. Still, a wildly effective day for the large part, and it does appear that a lot of people are talking about Ukraine's threat to the Belarusians, considering the fact that the Russians are being pushed back right now on the most heavily fought-on battlefield, the battlefield of Pokrovsk. A lot of people are wondering, are the Ukrainian threats against the Belarusians really worth it, or are they really even serious about that? Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we are hearing today that the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is warning Belarus directly, specifically Lukashenko, against aggression during the upcoming Zapad military exercises because a lot of people speculated that Zapad could be a cover to either attack a NATO country or invade Ukraine from the north. And it sounds like Ukraine's starting to take that very seriously, and they're very concerned about Belarus launching an invasion from their northern border. So it looks like 51% of the audience said Ukraine is simply taking precautions by issuing that statement, and 39% said Ukraine has intel of new Russian invasion possible, and 6% said I'm 50-50 on the question. And to read you the exact statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine said, quote unquote, "We warn Minsk against reckless provocations and we advise you to remain prudent." So they didn't say they had intel that an invasion was coming, but I would say they've gotten some sort of rumor or indication that it could be likely, or at least it's possible based on the force posturing in the area. So to me, it seems like it's a 50-50 to me. We're not really sure exactly what Zapad's going to turn out to be, but with that large of a number of troops, you got to stay on your toes, and Ukraine is definitely staying on their toes with this statement right here. And of course, that's a wise statement to make. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say I would be with the 50%. I believe that they're taking a precaution, considering that most of the Russian regiments that have been removed from the Central Military District, or as it's now called, the Moscow Military District, are currently around the city of Grodno. It's highly unlikely that these forces would be able to relocate in a rapid enough amount of time, stage and coordinate their efforts, and then launch an offensive into Ukraine within the amount of time left in between now and the upcoming Zapad 2025 military exercise. For this reason, I would highly doubt that the Ukrainian armed forces would expect an actual invasion by Belarusian or Russian forces from a northern axis originating near the northern Ukrainian border, but the Ukrainians do have to make sure that they take precautions and have to issue this threat because that could happen. Once again, I have to make it very clear to everyone that as far as diplomacy is concerned, and diplomacy involving military actions or possible military escalations, there can be no room for error. We always have to assume the worst case scenario whenever anything is happening. When a war game is happening, we have to assume that it is a prelude or a disguise for an attempted invasion, and we have to treat it accordingly. Example, like the Ukrainians are right now. When the Russians and the Belarusians are now conducting a war game in Belarus, they have to do their due diligence as a nation and assume that there could be a worst case scenario to come out of this and try and operate accordingly, either relocating forces into the area that will be able to operate a screen or a blocking action, at least until other reinforcements could arrive, or in this instance, issuing through the foreign ministry a direct warning to the Belarusians that any attempts to even reach the Ukrainian border will be met with strong action. This is something that I have to say is a wise action, a precaution entirely, but still a wise action nonetheless. I would highly doubt, though, that there would be an offensive coming from the northern border of Ukraine, because most Russian forces that we've heard of so far, which is about 4 to 5 regiments at least publicly, are currently around the area of Grodno, or specifically around the Ozary and Gozha training grounds. You can actually see the Gozha training ground right here. This is it. You can actually see all the tracks for the armored vehicles and such things. And notice how close it is to the border. Actually, the top of this training range, just to let you all know, is literally 3/4 of a mile away from the Lithuanian border. Just to give you all an idea of how close this military exercise will be to crossing the border. A little bit close.
That is close.
Insanely close, really. But outside of that, that would be my 2 cents on the matter. We have also been able to hear of another significant development today, and it appears that The Korean DMZ is generally back on the menu, and we actually have a special segment for North Korea tonight because there's been a lot of interesting stuff that's actually come out today about the North Koreans, and we're going to be making sure to cover that as much as we can because it is wild. But let me move you all on into the major development that we've been able to hear of today near to the area of the Korean DMZ. To give you all a little bit of a background, around the time of the latter end of World War II, the Soviet Union had actually started an invasion into Japanese-controlled Manchuria, which is now part of northern China, and also into the Korean Peninsula as well. At the end of the Second World War, it was decided that the Korean Peninsula would be divided into two, with a US-backed South Korea and a Soviet-backed North Korea. Around the time of the mid-part or early part of the spring of 1950, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, aka North Korea, conducted an armed offensive into South Korea. The South Koreans were pushed back all the way to the area of the port of Busan into a small area that was known at the time as the Pusan Pocket. The city was actually spelled with a P at the time, Pusan instead of Busan. It was changed a couple of decades ago to Busan in English spelling. I wonder why. Nevertheless, U.S. forces began to flood in defense and support of the South Koreans, and the United Nations actually deemed this to be a situation to respond and get involved in. And this was the only time that there was a United Nations effort to get involved directly in ground fighting. I don't believe that there's been another instance of that in history. Nevertheless, a U.S. naval landing occurred at Incheon behind the North Korean lines, which forced the North Koreans to rapidly retreat out of South Korea due to the threat of encirclement. U.S. forces, along with the South Koreans and UN forces, were actually able to push the North Koreans all the way up to the very edge of the Yalu River, which is the river that demarks the border between the People's Republic of China and North Korea. The Chinese then got involved, pushed the United States and UN forces back down to the area of the 38th parallel, and in 1953 a ceasefire was signed, making the front line at the time the border, which still exists to this day. The very middle, where this line is right here in the DMZ, is where the fighting actually stopped way back in 1953. So, since then, the two sides have technically never been at peace. We signed a peace treaty with North Korea, but South and North Korea only signed a ceasefire. It's probably the longest standing ceasefire that exists in the world, and it's also been broken endless times. Recently, it appears that it's starting to get close to being broken and going into a full-blown border skirmish again as of today, as we were able to hear that South Korean forces of the Republic of Korea's army have opened fire against Democratic People's Republic of Korea's Korean People Army's armed forces near to the area of the border. To read you all the exact details that we have at the moment, North Korea has accused South Korea's military of firing over 10 warning shots earlier this week at DPRK soldiers engaged in a border reinforcement project. Ko Jung-chol, Vice Chief of the Korean People's Army General Staff, warned that if such actions continue, Pyongyang will regard them as deliberate military provocation and respond with corresponding countermeasures. This comes as North Korea is installing additional boomboxes along the border, directly countering the South Koreans' effort to dismantle them in a bid to de-escalate tensions. The KCNA, which has been releasing daily statements condemning the Olchi Freedom Shield exercise, again denounced the drills as extremely provocative and aggressive. The state outlet doubled down on warnings of self-defense actions in response to perceived provocations. Taken together, these moves suggest North Korea is probing the resolve of South Korea's new president, Lee Jae-myung. The situation bears a close watch in the coming days and weeks. So we generally
Now, isn't that goofy right there? That North Korea is trying to install more speakers, right as South Korea is dismantling their propaganda speakers that were blasting into North Korea. I don't know exactly what they were playing on there. I think they were playing like maybe messages of propaganda and also some music of the West as well. But that doesn't make any sense at all. It's like South Korea is finally trying to de-escalate by taking those speakers down. So North Korea responds by installing more speakers. I mean, that's just silly.
It is absolutely silly, but from what we understand, the North Korean position with the Russian Federation is actually allowing them to be far more aggressive, as they generally are not relying on any sort of reconciliation with the West to provide them with food aid or any other additional aid, because they generally are able to get all of those supplies and types of food aid from the Russian Federation, meaning that at least in the North Koreans' foreign policy initiatives, there is no reason to try and de-escalate with the South at this point, and to continue to try and raise the tensions as much as possible level because there really is no reason to decrease them at the moment, at least in terms of what North Korea could get as a benefit out of doing that. So that appears to be the reason why they are starting to continuously escalate. And I also got to be honest with you all that the North Korean depiction of the story is, of course, incredibly one-sided. From what we've been able to hear from South Korean sources, these North Korean soldiers actually crossed the DMZ for a temporary amount of time, which is the reason why the warning shots were fired. It is incredibly obvious to many people that have any kind of common sense that North Korean soldiers crossing the demilitarized zone, which is the demarcation line between the two countries, obviously would warrant shooting at them to warn them not to keep coming across, lest they actually get shot directly. That makes a great deal of sense. That's the reason why the DMZ exists. So the North Koreans said, or generally saying, we had a right to cross the DMZ, and it's absolutely unwarranted that they shot at us because we might have been potentially trying to invade their country or at least conduct some sort of a raid or a probing action, which would be an action of war. So how dare they? Now we're angry, and if they keep doing that because our soldiers are violating the demarcation line, we're going to start shooting at them. That's practically the North Korean response that came out today. And a lot of people have been talking about that one, because this, once again, is not the first time that we've heard on this channel of some sort of a small incident happening that might start to build up into a major snowball on the North Korean border, or generally what's called the DMZ. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
So it looks like 47% of the audience said it'll be nothing at all. It'll simply go away and it'll be a nothing burger, while 34% said it will turn into a minor conflict, and 13% said it might turn into a full war. And based on what we're seeing here, it sounds like it was just warning shots. Now, the thing that caught my attention was North Korea says this happened on Tuesday, which was about 3 or 4 days ago. So it took them 3 or 4 days to actually report on it. So apparently it wasn't that bad for them to wait that long to say something about it. So it sounds like North Korea was simply looking for an excuse to bring it up, because otherwise they would have brought it up the day it happened. But they haven't brought it up until Friday, which is today, and I would say it's not that big of a deal. I would say it sounds like South Korea was simply trying to repel people away from the border that might have been probing it. So not totally uncommon. Of course, it doesn't happen very often, but it's also not uncommon either. So I'm going to say it's probably going to be nothing at all. It'll probably go away, but of course, it's just indicative of this, the tensions that are always there at the DMZ. It's constantly like this, and it's very, very tense. So I'm with the 47%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 47%. It's generally not that big of a deal. This is a fairly uncommon occurrence, but it's not unheard of. We have heard of this sort of a thing before in the history of the channel, and it hasn't really resulted in a great deal. This is certainly not the worst that we've seen the Korean DMZ get to, even in the past 3.5 years that we've been covering news every day. Outside of that, however, it is showing that the North Korean position is solidifying and becoming a lot more hostile against Western aligned countries due to their continued financial and material support that they are receiving from the Russian Federation because of North Korea's involvement in the Ukraine war, which generally their involvement extends to the point that it's allowing them to get a great deal of cheap goods such as food, construction materials, and military technology and military equipment from the Russian Federation, in their eyes, at an extreme discount cost. Most of the stuff has been completely unavailable recently to North Korea. So the fact that the Russians are giving them this stuff at all, it's well worth its value, no matter what the North Koreans have to do to be able to secure it. And this also brings us on into something else. We have probably some of the craziest stuff to talk about today out of Pyongyang. Very rarely do we ever get to see glimpses into North Korean media, but we did get to see a lot of it today, near to the area of the Pyongyang International Airport, which you can see up here, which, I gotta say this, big credit to the North Koreans. You know, London Heathrow, which is one of the busiest airports in Europe, has 2 runways. Pyongyang International Airport is the least busiest airport in the entirety of Asia, and somehow it also has 2 runways. I mean, great on them. I bet you the air traffic really warranted the building of an entire second runway out here near Sogam. I don't know why they did that. That probably cost a lot of money and took a lot of time. And this thing also looks pretty damn rough. There's like puddles and like shrubs growing on this thing. It looks like it's not really well maintained. And they have a little bridge that also looks like it's poorly maintained over the Patong River, which sounds like
Man, I think the
water.
rough part about that is you don't want to fall in that river. That thing right there looks like it could have some nasty stuff in it, like turds or something. You know, when North Korea was sending the turd balloons over to South Korea back in, like, I think a couple months ago, that's probably where they got the turd water from, was that river right there. It looks nasty enough.
Man, honestly, it might be. Also, we could see some of their support aircraft, the Lushin 76s, a couple of I want to say those are Antonovs. I think they are because they're generally mostly from the Cold War era. And you can also see the supporting base that the Korean People's Army Air Force has here at the facility as well, right over here. This is generally a better one. And also, as far as the quality of life goes, pilots and service members of the Korean People's Army Air Force, especially if they're pilots, get a lot better facilities and treatment than any other of the armed forces because the North Koreans are scared that if they don't treat them well, they might just defect with a jet and they'll lose a jet in the process along with the pilots. So they treat them incredibly well. That's why this looks somewhat new and a lot nicer than what you'd normally see in North Korea. However, right over here, near to the tarmac, or generally the ramp at Pyongyang International Airport, we were able to see that the North Koreans have now officially repatriated more of the dead from the war in Ukraine. And it's a little bit weird because they are absolutely turning this into cult worship. By the way, also one other thing, I'd also like y'all to note that the aircraft that returned the North Korean dead was a Russian Ilyushin 76. The North Koreans' Ilyushin 76s are apparently so bad off, they weren't really reliable enough to make the full flight to pick up their own dead, so the Russians had to fly in the North Korean dead for them. But nevertheless, here's the little clip that they did today of the cult worship that they're doing about their guys who died in the Kursk Oblast. So it's a sad version of the Guka, which is the North Korean anthem. We can see the caskets laid out here in a large row. I'm going to turn that down a little bit more. And we can see the fat man here looking over the whole spectacle.
Is that a trumpet or a bassoon?
That is a trumpet.
Okay.
After Kim Jong-un sits on it, though, it generally becomes a bassoon.
Turns into a tuba.
From what we understand, out of about the 12,500 North Korean infantrymen that were sent as a part of the infantry regiment that North Korea sent to the Kursk Oblast, only about 20% of them survived without injury. Something around 40% of the entire regiment was killed, and the remainder were wounded.
Man, there's that narrator.
You know, it's the same thing every time.
You got to give North Korea credit, though. Like, even though they can't fight worth a damn, in my opinion, and also, obviously, they're starving to death, they do really go over the top when it comes to the appearance of it, at least. At least they're trying to look the part, but they don't really have anything, like, actually substance behind it.
They look the part. That's the thing about communist regimes. They always do a lot with the showmanship. Really, every dictatorship does, even the fascist ones. They go over the top with the showmanship. But as far as it actually comes down to being good at anything, they suck at practically everything. And of course, we can go back and find all of the video clips and evidence till the cows came home of the Korean People's Army's expeditionary force in Kursk and how badly they really did. There was endless proof that they were taking insanely high losses and practically attributing no real benefit to the Russians in the Battle of Kursk.
That guy cracks me up.
Yeah, the narrator is rough. He's also so fat he can't actually bend over. He just tilts his head down.
Jeez, man, he really can. Can you imagine? I think if he actually bent over like the other fellows right there, that he might actually fall over.
I think so, man. Really. Also, by the way, this isn't even close to the amount of people who actually died in Ukraine. We're estimating on a conservative end that at least 4,000 North Koreans were killed in the Battle of Kursk. So this isn't even a measurable fraction of the amount that died in Kursk. And we do understand that a lot of them were probably just left to rot. And also the North Koreans would most likely not accept their return and would rather them be buried in unmarked graves in Russia. So that way they weren't admitting how many of them actually ended up dying. That also would be a high likelihood as well. And then we can see them giving him a motorcycle escort.
Why do they have motorcycle police? There's barely any cars in North Korea.
I don't even know. I have no clue. That's like a very American thing, by the way, to do like a motorcycle police escort. But anyways,
I feel like him to see stuff on TV, like, for example, like the motorcycle escorts in America. He sees our movies, TV shows, and things like that, and he says, I want that. And he's like, and then everybody, of course, has to do it. Otherwise, they get assassinated by him. So they got to go and find some BMW motorcycles or something to start running around the place. Yeah, that seems very American, though. It seems very Western.
Yeah, it's really American. Also, on top of that, we were able to hear that that Kim Jong-un stated, and I want to see, did I put it down on the map? Because I think I didn't. Okay, so I put this down as a duplicate just to make sure we had one that ran, just in case if another one failed. Kim Jong-un did state today, according to Korean state media, about the losses and everything else involved with the Koreans' involvement in Ukraine. Good. Now the world can see how strong and powerful our army is. That's what he actually said, according to the state media. I don't think that guy's living in reality. They did very badly. They did so badly the Russians actually pulled them off of the line and replaced them with another Russian unit because they'd rather have Russians dying in the battle than them, because at least when the Russians died, something happened. When the North Koreans were dying, literally nothing was happening. There was hardly any ground or anything done at all. But what is even crazier is that the North Koreans made an entire, not even kidding, 20-minute long documentary. The Korean Department of Propaganda and Agitation, which is responsible for all media in North Korea, actually apparently had photographers and filmographers in the Kursk Oblast filming the North Koreans as they were fighting in the Battle of Kursk in the winter of last year. So we actually got to see some of the clips they took, and it painted a totally different story than what we actually saw from our end of the battle. So let's go take a look at what they put out, because it is something. So here it is. By the way, we're not going to show the whole thing really quickly, just to say that. If y'all want to see the entire thing, you have to go down to the link in the description below, click on that, and then go click on this link on the map. This is a 20-minute long video, so we're going to cut it down to maybe show about 6 or 7 minutes of it. We're not going to show all of it, but if you want to see the whole thing, you can click on the link in the description below, which will take you to the map I'm using on air that has the link to this video on it in Pyongyang. So, with that, let's get into the video. Also, I'm fairly confident nothing from North Korea is copyrighted. So, they're communists, so I don't believe they even believe in copyrights. So anyways, they open up with an intro of the North Korean flag. Skipping forward a little bit, they of course show off the North Korean army waving a red flag in the sun. They do that in every single propaganda clip. Yeah, North Korea, baby! But moving on from that, we also have the Squid Game manager doing the narration, the one that would walk into the room and say, and tell everyone how much money was left after each game. They got that guy doing the narration. Anyways, you see them showing them signing the waivers to volunteer to go to Ukraine.
Waivers? What, are they scared about getting sued or something?
Matthew, litigation is a nasty thing in North Korea, didn't you
know?
know?
Kim Jong-un's worried about litigation. I thought he literally was the dictator. What? Since when do you need a waiver to do something? Who's he protecting who against?
Man, they gotta have a waiver. I mean, it's North Korea. They have to have a waiver. But they sign off on the waiver. There's their names they signed. They're voluntold. They weren't even voluntold, they just went. Like, they were ordered to go and they went. There was no volunteering in this at all. Anyways, moving on from that, they show off some letters that they wrote. Skipping forward a little bit, this is the most 90s-ish looking thing I've ever seen, by the way. This little, like, transition card right here.
Yeah, it looks like it's from a whole different era right here. Like, the camera quality's, like, really old school looking. The editing's old school. They must be using some old editing software to do this.
Also, by the way, once again, North Korea is so strong and powerful, they're having to transport their guys around in a Russian Ilyushin 76. There's a Russian flag on that IL-76. So, once again, great and powerful. And also, hey, look at all of these families. Look at how happy and proud they are in the great capital city of Pyongyang. And, what's this? None of them are wearing a North Korean uniform. North Korea is so strong and powerful that in their propaganda, they're not even wearing their own uniforms or using their own equipment. Everything they got was loaned to them by the Russians. I wish I could understand the North Korean dialect or Korean in general, because I would love to know how they explain that part away, if they even did, about why in the world they did not use anything from North Korea and everything was Russian provided.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Outside of that, we also saw them doing their little hoopla. This is a very typical thing right here. They gotta do the whole thing with the rifles, all that crap. They do it in every single propaganda film. And then we can see them going out in the winter smocks. My God, not the winter smocks. Now they're in Kursk. They're showing off a drone clip here of the city of Suja. And also we can see them running around and firing at stuff and tossing grenades in. But you know what's kind of a little interesting about this, folks, is that this None of this appears to actually be showing real combat or fighting. It appears that they filmed all of this like the Akhmat did in post after the Battle of Suja was over and the town had been retaken. Because if you look at this right here, let me go show you all this part again. So here's the town of Suja that they filmed by drone. This town was already completely destroyed. The town of Suja got destroyed only when the Russians pushed back through it. So by the time this drone video had been filmed, the Russians had most likely already retaken the town and had pushed the Ukrainians out. So they're filming everything in post after the battle had already been won by the Russians. So just like the Akhmat, they show up after the Russians win the battle, and then they pretend like they were a part of it. So a little bit interesting with that.
Well, you know they can't show them actually fighting. Then they'd actually show the slaughter going on. So they got to sort of take some B-roll while they're in the peacetime area. Because if they show them actually fighting, it's going to be a bad day.
Yeah, like, look at this. Like, the cameraman here, this is technically, folks, what they're saying in North Korea. This is real combat footage. So this cameraman standing in the wide open in the middle of a park, right next to this guy who's hiding behind a tree. Cameraman's not. And he's firing supposedly at the Ukrainians. And then
Also, by the way, go back to that gun for a second. Go back to that frame. Look at that magazine right there. That is like the extendo magazine, like for that thing right there. What is that? The like 100 or 60 round capacity mag or something? That's a very long one.
I believe that is actually a 45 round mag. Let me go pull that up. AK-74 45.
Those are unreliable, by the way. That's why I'm pointing that out. Because typically those larger capacity mags like that, they usually have issues. So that's why I'm wondering.
Yeah, these are
45 rounds.
Yeah, this is actually the 45 round mag that would be used for an RPK. So I actually was right. It was a 45 round mag. It's a dual stack magazine, so technically it should be a little bit more effective, but when you start to stretch out the mag capacity to this point, usually the feed system, everything starts to screw up. But this guy's using one, so he's also Jesus Christ, folks. How much rifle training did this guy get? Look at him. Watch this, man. Watch. When he's firing that rifle, it's bouncing around everywhere. Look at that. What the hell was that?
Yeah, no recoil control, none at all. And also, they showed a video of some guy just like bonsai charging the battlefield, or at least the studio scene here. He just ran out right into the middle with no cover or anything. He was just running out by himself too. There was nobody with him.
Also, their version of room clearing is just charging straight through the room and not even looking in the corners. Look at this. There they go. Then this guy opens up a door, and he just looks straight down the hall, like right down the hall. So if there was someone,
he slammed the door into the other guy's like elbow. Like that dude's sitting there with the funny bone vibrations going through his arm, talking about It's like the other guy's like they're looking straight down the hallway.
Bro, let's watch it. Bam! And also, this guy shoves his head straight into the hallway. So if someone had an M870, which is a 12 gauge shotgun, that guy, everything just turned to jello. But this is a fake clip, so it's not an actual fight. So he tosses the grenade down the hallway, stands there.
Oh my God.
Bro, they both got shot from that because the grenade only bounced like maybe 10 feet down the hall with that weak throw. Oh my God.
It blasted the doors off the hinges. Now, that is not far enough away from that grenade. That is unsafe as hell.
Absolutely not. They don't have OSHA in North Korea, though. So, and then we can all see them.
They have OSHA.
Yeah, they have shit instead of shit. We can also see them all creating a firing line along the tree sides, just firing into the air. They don't even explain it what. I'm guessing they're just assuming everyone knows what a drone is in North Korea. We can also see them calling. This is the most animated radio order I've ever seen. Look at this guy. That is the most animated I've ever seen anyone. And also, why in the world is he holding the radio that far away from his mouth? Like, why isn't he holding it closer to where they could actually hear him? So, anyways.
Give him a break, man. He's not in Hollywood business. This is new stuff for him. They said action, and he wasn't sure what it meant. So he's like, let me try to do my best here. We got to put on a show, gents. We got to show the people what we're doing out here, even though there's literally no enemy, like within seeing distance.
Also, they fired off one round from their infamous Hwacha that they've been giving the Russians loads of. We can also see them firing 60mm infantry mortars. These have been pretty much phased out in most armies around the world. By the way, like, you don't really see these a lot in most units. So just having an infantry unit with these, like, if it was an airborne unit, it would make sense because it's got to be light and portable. Like, they're used there. But in a normal infantry unit, No, like usually in a normal infantry unit, if there was any mortar, it would be 120 millimeter and 81 millimeter. Those are standard. 60 millimeter is getting on the extreme small end, but they did use them. They show one guy firing an RPG. Also,
Cameraman about ate the back blast like crazy too. He was like literally standing right there, right off the side of it.
also we could see them showing footage of FPVs and drones hitting Ukrainian vehicles. But from what we know, there was no North Korean drone unit involved in the battle. They didn't even know what drones were, much less how to use them themselves. So we see them dragging across some supplies across Piss River. We also see them getting into a firefight, an explosion randomly happening in the streets, some stuff on fire. And of course, they got to whip out the notebooks. North Koreans can't go anywhere without a notebook. So someone's writing down notes. They got a map out. That's probably the political officer if we're working on how the Korean People's Army actually works. The real commander is not the commander. The real commander is the political officer of equal rank. So that's most likely the political officer pointing out on the map with a stick. Everyone's, of course, got to take notes. They're all wandering around, doing stuff, firing, blowing up a house in a very pre-filmed kind of a way. This almost looks like a movie. More houses burning. I don't even know what the hell they were doing. We can see them looking at more maps, looking exhausted. Like, that's a great thing to show.
They kind of look hopeless. Actually, that was not a good shot for the video. Actually, it looked like they're laying there tired and hopeless, both of them.
And then they started showing wounded. Like, they started showing the wounded, and now they're showing this, which the guy climbing a tree, apparently in the middle of battle, to set up a electronics communication system so that way they can talk to command and then blow something up, apparently. Although that clip was clearly edited in because that's a totally different time of day in a totally different area in a totally different season of the year. So that doesn't even align. We then see a cluster round being used, also some drones. We can see them running through a field and technically shooting down the drones. We all know the North Koreans were really good at that. It's not like we saw hundreds of them get taken out by drones. That never happened. We can see them bandaging the wounded, taking care of each other, because that's what they do.
What's going on here? Somebody get that grenade out of his hand. He was literally loose, and they're letting the man hold onto a grenade that's live. It's like, what the hell?
I think what they were saying in that clip, Matthew, was that the North Koreans were so valiant and brave they wouldn't even let themselves get taken alive by the enemy. I think that's what that clip was. Yeah, I think that's a little bit dark. But anyways, when you see them reloading some mags, fighting in the woods some more, showing off those smartphone clips. Don't ask the North Koreans what was on the smartphones in the search history, but they are showing what they filmed a little bit of.
Do you think the North Koreans had enough time to download NordVPN?
I wonder. That's a great question. Man, that is a wonderful question. Also, look at this, by the way, Matthew. Look at this. Now, this shows you how inexperienced the North Koreans are. Yes, a cellar that the Ukrainians might actually be in. Instead of tossing a grenade in to clear it, let's walk down in there. Pretty much into a kill zone. Let's walk into it and see what happens.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb right there. There's actually no sign at all that they're trained whatsoever, like even in basics at all. They don't seem to understand really anything. Room clearing, also approaching like an entrance to an underground thing like that. They're not doing it right. They're also running through open fields, which is like completely no cover at all. Obviously, it looks like they're not trained well, which is pretty much what we expected.
Also, we can see here the aftermath reels where it explains what happened to each person in the film. This one said that this North Korean soldier ran into a member of the International Legion. He said, "Welcome to Chirac, mother effer," and then lit him up. So that guy, his time on Earth was nigh. This one right here also says that this guy happened to run into a doorbell on a tree, and he pressed the doorbell, and then a wreath of bombs fell on top of him and got him. This next one here is actually showing the fat man. He's here! He's here! They had to include him. Because if y'all do not know, there's actually a rule in the Department of Agitation and Propaganda in Korea that every single clip, no matter if there's any context to it or not, it has to show the great leader at least once. That's something that's required in everything. Music, anything. It has to show him at least once. It's a rule.
I like how they have a political officer sitting back there in the middle of the aisle, staring at everybody to make sure nobody's laughing or anything like that. Just some guy just eyeballing everybody. Like, what are they saying?
Also, man, this one right here said this guy ended up getting shot by his own friends. They applied a tourniquet, but it wasn't tight enough, so he ended up just going a little loosey-goosey and out the window. Let's see. This one said that he got in a fight with a drunk Russian over some cigarettes, and the Russian ended up running him over with a tank. We all know that that's common. This one says that this guy ended up finding too many spicy videos on the internet, and he ended up deserting and was executed as a traitor to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This one's also saying that they found the birds, but they were not eaten on Tuesday. The birds ate him instead because he was a little shrimp. And a couple of others. It goes on and on. You know, similar stories, many such cases. But moving on from that and on through the clip, because we want to show a little bit more of it, they show off some of the letters that were written, and also masterfully written. Look at the handwriting. They even outlined the characters. Like, insane detail. Look at these illustrations. It's like a freaking artist from the Korean propaganda agitation department drew these and made these letters. They look a little too perfect, don't they? Because if y'all remember the real North Korean journalist that we got, or journal, let me go show y'all. North Korean soldier journal. Let me go get one, like a real one for y'all, to show y'all what they really drew. This is what, hold up, it didn't get over on the screen. This is what they actually were drawing, and this is what they show on North Korean TV that they drew on the letters.
It's propaganda.
It's propaganda. Totally different. No way. This is what it normally looked like. This is what they make it look like. Just to give you all an idea of how bad, how thorough the propaganda is, they even make fake letters and illustrations for their propaganda. Moving on from that, they show off the Hero of North Korea medal, yada yada, all that such. They show off some more stuff about them planning and talking. They put up some subtitles. They show the theater that this was shown in Pyongyang, people crying, very emotional. They show off Pyongyang. It's a wonderful thing. Mount Pektu. We all love the great leader. We're all smiling and laughing. It's a better world. All that sort of garbage. We show this guy right here, which honestly looks like Kim Jong-un's daughter in a sense, like almost in a similar way, a little bit uncanny, honestly. Then they show him sitting around singing, and some pictures like it's wonderful memories. Let's see here. Oh yeah, of course they have to hold a picture of the Grand Marshal, the Great Marshal, Kim Jong-un, in red because it's the Communist Party. We all know that's the Workers' Party of Korea. And they swear their loyalty to him, even on the front lines. The whole thing's absolutely unreal, what they depicted here. Totally different than what actually happened, because from what we know, 2/3 of the regiment was wiped out in less than a month, which is it was so bad the Russians even said it was bad. It was so bad they had to get pulled from the line because they were completely combat ineffective within less than a month. Totally different story being depicted in North Korea. Crazy stuff. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about the great Marshal Kim Jong-un's patriotic statements that he made to incense the public in North Korea about the amazing combat efforts that they made to prove their strength to the world. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? Do they think that Kim Jong-un is speaking truth or straight up BS? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so after seeing that mind-bending propaganda right there, apparently the reason why Kim Jong-un is showing that and showing everybody what the Kim Jong-un soldiers are capable of is because he's trying to prove strength in the eyes of the world stage. And what do you think of that goal? Do you think he achieved it or do you think he failed? So 73% said it proves that North Korea cannot fight at all, while 11% said it proves North Korea's a regional power, yes, and 7% said they are good enough, in my opinion. And I would say it proves North Korea can't fight at all, because even according to the Russians and what they did to the North Korean soldiers, they had to pull them off the front lines because they were so bad, they were getting slaughtered in such large numbers. They literally had to pull a mercy card out on them and bring them away from the front lines to let them try to gain their bearings again. They were doing that bad. Also, as you can see from the footage, they don't even know how to clear rooms properly. They don't know basic troop movements, and also they run out right in the middle of open fields where they're in the wide open and able to get shot at by the enemy. So they don't know what they're doing. They're poorly trained. They were sent there, but throughout all the propaganda. The real reason they were sent there is because Putin came to an agreement with Kim Jong-un to get those soldiers, and in exchange, Russia would provide certain things to North Korea to help them survive as a country. So that's the real reason why they're being sent. It's not to prove strength at all. It's because there's a deal being met here between the two leaders, and that's why they were sent. So I would say I'm with a 73%. It proves North Korea can't fight, and outside the nuke threat they've really got a really terrible military. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree, and I'll just summarize it in this way. When the Russians, who have taken 1 million wounded and killed over the course of the whole war, see that your unit, the only one you've sent, is doing so badly, they go, my God, it'd be better to have literally no one there than them, and they pull them off the line. That's all we need to know. We know that because the Russians said it. We know that because everyone who was fighting on the Russian side that had a social media account was saying, oh my God, these guys suck so bad, it's unreal. Like, it'd just be better for them to literally leave and for us to cover the front line and extend ourselves farther, just because they don't do anything. They just get killed and they don't improve the situation at all for us. So they are an absolute joke. And of course they have to paint it that they were the greatest ever on the battlefield, and they even taught the Russians some lessons on how to fight. But the truth is that they suck. And generally, even the clips that they took, which were dramatized for the public, truly showed that they have no concept of what real fighting actually looks like. So even still, but anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, folks, before we move on, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to throw in a little bonus here before we move on into the halftime, in a sense. Inside of China, in the Qinghai province, which is in somewhat central western China to a sense, there was an incident that happened overnight. This bridge, oh, dang it showed it a little bit. This bridge is a massive new bridge that is a part of a high-speed rail project that is being built into this area. And from what we understand, this is, well, actually, one second, I want to make sure there was a let's see. So apparently it was just a normal, no, it was a high-speed rail. It's the Sichuan-Qinghai Railway. Okay, so it is a railway bridge. I did have that correct. So this is a new high-speed rail bridge that was being built into the area of Qinghai. This thing is absolutely massive. This one span, just to give you all an idea of how big this is the size of a single span on the Hernando de Soto Bridge, which is one of the largest bridges. I want to see if I can show you this. Now, let me just type in the bridge instead of the crack. So here we go. This is one of the largest bridges that crosses the Mississippi River. That one span y'all are seeing right here is actually the same distance in length as a single span here on the Hernando de Soto Bridge. So this is a fairly large one. And of course, the Chinese love to show off the propaganda. Y'all have seen the clips out there on the internet. Oh, China's so advanced. Look, they're carving out mountains to build these new motorways and high-speed rails. Well, this is one of the bridges that was being built, and this is what happened in the middle of the night. The Chinesium could just not hold up to the bullshit being projected in the propaganda. It literally collapsed and ended up killing 12 Chinese workers in the process who were on the bridge during the collapse.
Wow, that's terrible right there. Honestly, just to fall right down. Wow, that is actually very bad. A daytime video. I didn't know we had the daytime shot of it as well, but it looks like the metal really did just like shear off. I can't tell if that's the part where it was fastened to the other part of the bridge there, or did the metal just snap?
From what we know, a rope snapped that was helping to support the bridge, and then whatever had already been attached just sheared clean off.
Wow, that's insane. Honestly, that's honestly shows you how bad Chinese construction really is. They build these grand projects and they don't build them quite right.
Yeah, that's the thing about everything in China is that it looks great on paper, folks, but why like the big thing that everyone has to ask, how in the world is China producing more steel annually than the United States or the Soviet Union did at their peak over the course of 10 years of their peak in a single year? Most of the steel is subpar quality. This kind of proves it to an extent, because you would think that a singular cable collapsing wouldn't be the doom of a whole bridge, but it was. So a little bit interesting with that, and once again showing that either OSHA does not exist in China, or Chinesium steel is not really up to snuff. So there was y'all's bonus clip from East Asia for the day, once again proving the Chinese aren't really up and at the forefront in terms of steel production or workplace safety for that matter. But moving on from that and on out of East Asia, it is time for us to start getting to the Middle East and back on into Europe and the war in Ukraine itself. But before we get on all into that, I do understand, folks, that we have a couple of questions that folks have asked us, and I want to make sure to take a little bit of a breather so that way we can have a halftime segment here, and also to be able to address a couple of questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one is going to go to, guess who? It is LC39A. I feel like we're saying his name every single night these days. He's very generously supporting the channel pretty much for the last 2 weeks, and he put in a $138 support. And thank you very much, LC39A, for that support once again, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, hello to all LSAers.
Hello to all the LSAers, and a big hello to you, LC39A, and a massive thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have been able to keep it running, so that way the LSA could be here tonight. So a massive, huge thanks to you so much once again. I've got to say that we are hearing your name often a lot, and the support is absolutely massive, and it helps us to keep this channel running, and we are massively appreciative and thankful that you enjoy this channel so much, that you support it so greatly, as it helps us to keep this thing on air, so that way we can do all kinds of cool projects and neat things in the background that I'll probably be telling y'all about, or giving y'all a little bit of a sneak peek of here in a minute. But with that, a huge thanks to you all so much once again, and a massive thanks to you, LC39A, for your support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second super chat here is a $100 donation, from Uncle David, other nephew, who put in that 100. And thank you very much, good sir, Uncle David, for that support as well, and being a longtime channel legend. And he said, thanks for all the hard work this week. And Monday seemed like you would rather be talking about how climate change has taken its toll on the A10 Warthog. And please take one from the chat in LSA.
And I got to thank you for the support, Uncle David, other nephew. And I got to thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And I got to be honest with you, that whole thing that happened on Monday, it wasn't really that worthwhile, honestly. It was an okay stream. I mean, it did fine, but honestly, the developments that were going on, it was interesting, but it was not as wild as I thought it was going to end up being. And as far as we're seeing right now, it really didn't have too much of an impact on much of anything. You know, of course, 180s are being done every day. I would have to say that at this point, the President of the United States has done more 180s than Tony Hawk has done on a skateboard, which really takes a lot to be able to do that. But nevertheless, I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying our hard work, Uncle David, other nephew, because the work never ends. And I'm actually going to use your super chat here to talk about something that I've been working on today, all day today, and it's getting into its preliminary phase, but there's still a lot to be done. But I was wanting to show it to all of y'all because I think y'all are going to be incredibly excited about one of the projects that we're working on here in the background that is going to be incredibly cool. So as many of y'all know, there are a lot of maps out there like mine that cover the major events that happen in the world with bulletin marks, and there's also maps like Deep State that cover the war in Ukraine and where the units are. I've generally always wanted to create a map a lot like Deep State's, but I wanted to create a map that was more voluminous in the amount of detail and information, and not only that, to make a wide series of them that depicted multiple situations or developments around the world, and a whole bunch of things that pertain to it. And so I started off today because I found out that some things had changed in the interface that I use here to create my maps, and it's actually allowing for me to make a certain kind of a project possible. And it's going to be the biggest one ever undertaken on the channel in terms of map making projects. This is what we have right now so far on the Global Force Disposition Map, which is a brand new project that is being made here on the channel that is going to be outlining and locating exactly where every single unit, publicly stated that is, there's nothing that's classified here at all, everything is publicly accessible, but it will be showing every single air, naval, and ground unit of the U.S. Armed Forces and where they are in the world currently. And we're also going to be doing the very same thing on this map with the Russian Federation. And then we'll be moving on into doing this map in multiple different iterations with the Russian army and then the Ukrainians on the same map and updating that daily. We'll then be doing that for all European forces that are not American, so on and so forth. It is extremely detailed. This has taken 7 hours to get to this point today, which is a lot of effort, because this is not our normal map where it is just event and then link. This is actually extremely detailed, to the point that it actually has an interface that viewers can work through that explains, if you've never really understood how the military works, at the top it tells you where to start, which is right here. It actually shows you a map of all of the different combatant commands that the United States has, and from there, you can actually work through the different combatant commands, like, for example, the only one that's somewhat semi-complete at this point, US EUCOM. It gives you an exact explanation of what US EUCOM does, the forces directly under its command, and from there, you can work all the way down to the brigade level. So, for example, let's say that you were wanting to find the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade on this map, exactly where they were at this moment, at least publicly stated, updated. Nothing is classified. Everything is publicly accessible. Just takes a lot of research to find it. You would start off at the Department of Defense. You would find US EUCOM. US EUCOM's command is headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany, exactly on this marker right here. This then tells you what US EUCOM does and everything about it. It then tells you that its ground forces are under the control of US Army Europe and Africa. US Army Europe and Africa is headquartered out of Wiesbaden, near Frankfurt am Main in Germany. You then come here. This then states the units that are under the command of the US Army Europe and Africa, which would include the 5th Corps. But considering that this is something that generally is incredibly interesting, we would go to the 5th Corps. It then explains the units that are under the direct control of the 5th Corps. Then, because of the units that are under control of the 5th Corps, we can then go right back to Germany, right down here to the city of Ansbach, and we can find the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade. All of the details about the equipment that it uses, where it is permanently based out of, and what its general order of battle would look like if it was to engage enemy forces inside of Europe. The very same thing will be done for all U.S. forces in every single combatant command around the world, and we also will be mapping out, at least on this map in theory, every single Russian Federation armed force, where they are in Russia and occupied Ukraine, as well as Kaliningrad and Belarus, and we might even do the very same thing for the Chinese, all on the same map. So this is a fairly extensive project. This is the most extensive one so far. We also did that for the Air Force. Like, if you think the ground forces are interesting, you can do the very same track or identification method with the Air Force. And it actually shows their insignia for each unit, what's inside of each unit, and where they are based out of. This takes a lot of effort to be able to do, so we're generally planning on using this on stream for cross-reference here and there in some analysis. We'll never go into insanely deep detail on it, though, in stream. This is insanely detailed. It took 7 hours to do this already today. We don't have enough time on air to be able to get through this every single night and literally break down everything on how the whole military works, but it is a decent resource. And generally, because it is one that is taking an extremely long amount of time, we're kind of debating what to do with it. I'm wondering whether we should put this on our Patreon, so that way folks can support the project and also get access to it at the same time, or whether we're going to make this a publicly accessible map, because this is taking an extremely long amount of effort, and considering that this is practically a whole other full-time job in itself to make these kinds of maps, on top of running the show, which is another full-time job, I'm trying to figure out if this is something that has to become its own revenue stream to be able to try and support these efforts and this kind of work. So we will have to see about that, but this is a project that is being worked on in the background right now, and it's something that I'm already incredibly proud of. So let me know what y'all think. I've seen a lot of positive comments about this in the chat already. Let me know what y'all think about it. If y'all think it's incredibly cool, let me know, because if you think it's incredibly cool, there's a load of different types and styles of maps that we could do, like this one, that will go a million miles, if y'all really do love it. So with that, I hope that does, it kind of pop in as an Easter egg to your super chat, Uncle David, other nephew. And a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you have helped us to make this thing possible so far, and are continuing to help us to make this thing possible well on into the future. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the last question of this segment, and then on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, so the last one, excuse me, by the way, our last one here of the segment goes to Jack Ray, who puts in a $33 donation, and thank you very much, Jack, as well, for that support and also helping to keep us running. And Jack said, will the Ukrainians start the Zoot ride in the Russian rear with Flamingo soon, and will it tire the Russians out after that? And Zoot.
I think that they probably are. The fact that that thing has a 3,000 kilometer range means that they can strike incredibly deep behind Russian lines, practically over the Urals, and at the same time it has enough explosive mass that one hit will most likely do the job on anything that they target. So with that in mind, I have a feeling, at least in my opinion, that once the Flamingo actually starts to be used, we're never going to see it used on a close-range target. Everything is going to be way deeper inside of Russia that's getting hit by a Flamingo than Moscow even. I would say at a minimum, the minimum distance that they would consider it worthwhile to hit something with a Flamingo with would be Kazan and everything east of Kazan. Anything west of that and closer to Ukraine will most likely never be targeted or hit with a Flamingo, because it wouldn't make sense cost-wise or material-wise to expend that kind of a weapon on such a short distance target. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, Jack Ray, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. Also, by the way, Matthew, I just realized that Uncle David, other nephew, actually wanted a live chat, and I don't think we got it for him. So let's circle back really quickly and get a live chat in honor of Uncle David, other nephew.
All right, so the live chat question goes to JP. He said, will y'all cover the troop buildup near Venezuela, and if not, why? And we have been following that, by the way. I've been also following that myself. But the thing is, though, we kind of have to pick and choose these days what we cover and what we don't, because we're already so inundated with the European news and also with the Asian and Middle Eastern news that adding Venezuela to it would extend the news segment so long that it could be outrageous at that point. So unless Venezuela becomes a hotspot or something that starts breaking out really rapidly, we probably won't make it a main segment. But if y'all want us to maybe delve into it some, we maybe can during the question segment later. But I guess that's up to the audience on that one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, I think we're probably not going to cover that until it turns into an armed combat of a sort, or a war. We're most likely not going to cover it because troop buildups around Venezuela, at least for now, appears to be part of a posturing tactic more so than an actual preparation for war with Venezuela. So it's kind of in the periphery at the moment. And also, it sounds as though the force buildup is not incredibly large, at least at the moment. So I hope that does address that the best we can, at least from what we would know at the moment. But we could try and include a brief South American overview. It's just that there's so much going on any given day. Our news segment is getting, on average, up to about 2 hours in length every single day, and that is getting pretty laborious to be able to cover and also do the research on before the show, and also have it all mentally straightened out in our head to be able to do this. Because back in the day, it used to be as simple as Ukraine, Russia, Russia did this, Ukraine did that, this is how this impacts. Now we have to go Ukraine, Russia, Russia, Europe, Russia, America, Russia, Britain, Russia, Ukraine, and then Israel, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Yemen, Iran, Israel, so on and so forth, endlessly throughout the entire world, including India, Pakistan, Thailand, Cambodia, China, the greater world at large, everyone around them, Taiwan and everyone around them, South Korea and everyone around them. There's a lot to keep mentally straight, and I'm actually going to be honest with y'all, it's getting to the point that it's mentally stretching me thin, because I'm starting to stutter and slip over my words, because I'm having to keep so many different stories and monologues straight in my head that have completely different elements to them, completely different analysis tracks, historical information about them, the armed forces abilities of these countries, all that sort of a deal. It's a lot to not have a script on and just do like blind firing on air every night. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I could be able to say about it. But we will give it a shot, though. I mean, it's definitely not beyond our abilities. It's just that we're starting to get stretched, at least mentally for me, on the analysis side of things, incredibly thin. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news for the night. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into the Islamic Republic of Iran, and generally bullet firing everything that's coming out of the Middle East right now. The Iranians have stated that they've opened up weapons factories in some countries, and we will reveal them within a month if necessary. That pretty much means that the terrorists are running bomb-making factories out of a basement somewhere in Lebanon or Yemen, most likely. Outside of that, we also got to hear that the Iranians are trying to approach the concept of a Islamic NATO with Pakistan. As a meeting with the Pakistani ambassador to Iran, they proposed forming an Islamic NATO as a counterbalance to the West in Zionism. A little bit goofy, to be entirely honest, sounds a little stupid. Outside of that, we also got to hear that they're going to be cutting off cash subsidies to 3 million Iranians. 18 million will be cut by the end of the year. That's about a quarter of the population in Iran. So pretty much welfare is over in Iran, along with the water. So it appears that they will have an Islaminato and also no welfare, which is kind of weird since they're socialist, radical Islamic terrorists. It's a little bit odd that they're doing that. So with that, moving on out of the Islamic Republic of Iran and on into the state of Israel, we also were able to see that the Houthis have tried to conduct some attacks against the Israelis today. All of them, of course, have failed. We were able to see a Yemeni ballistic missile getting shot down over the city of Tel Aviv right there.
Just one missile again, that's all it was?
Yeah, just a singular pot-shot missile. And they also pot-shotted a singular drone into Israel as well, which was also subsequently shot down after the missile. That's the end of that clip. Also, by the way, what y'all are seeing right there, it was actually an F-16 that shot down the drone. So that's actually what you saw flying past the smoke cloud. The smoke cloud was once the drone. But outside of that, it appears that because of these small attacks, the Israelis have been annoyed, and they're now stating that they will be preparing a strong strike against the Houthis in Yemen, including Iranian-linked infrastructure inside of the country. So it does appear that the Iranian terrorist forces in the region are continuing to pester the Israelis, and the Israelis are, of course, going to get to bombing them. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well? And more importantly, what is everyone thinking about the statement that the Iranians made about the Iranian weapons factories hiding out in other countries?
All right, so Iran is claiming to have weapons facilities that they've opened up in other countries, a big grand opening that they'll reveal very soon. And what are your thoughts? 41% said it's probably the weapons plants in Russia, while 25% said it's probably weapons plants somewhere else in the Middle East, and 19% said it might be weapons plants even in China. So I would tend to believe they're probably still in the Middle East because these are weapons facilities that are being used to rearm the Iranian government, not rearm the Russian government. We do know that Russia does have licensed Shahed factories inside of Russia, but that is for the sole purpose of supplying the Russian military with those Shahed drones. So it wouldn't make much economic sense to build a factory in Russia to then ship the Iranian drones back to Iran. That would be kind of pricey and also kind of complicated as well. So I have a feeling it's probably weapons plants in the Middle East. It could be weapons plants in Pakistan. That's a possibility. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but it could be anywhere in the Middle East. So I'm with the 26%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would also be with the 26%. It's most likely weapons factories in the Middle East because they're most likely trying to arm and support organically their terrorist forces around the area, including the al-Nusra in Iraq and others that are generally not talked about often. So that's what I would generally believe. I would be the 26%. I think they're most likely inside of the Middle East. Outside of that, it's now time for us to get generally back on into the Ukraine war. Starting from the United States and moving our way towards Ukraine, we were able to hear of more developments in America today. We were able to hear that a U.S. general has been removed from his position after this general was the one who's voiced statements saying that the damage to Iranian nuclear sites was not as great as many had wanted it to be. We also were able to hear that the president stated that he was not happy. He told the president of the Russian Federation he was unhappy about him hitting an American factory inside of Ukraine. That's right, folks. An American industrial concern was hit with 5 cruise missiles overnight, and the president is only merely unhappy. Got to be honest with you.
Can we hear the statement?
I don't know if we can. I think the clip might be copyrighted.
Oh, no, it's from the White House.
Okay, so let's take a listen to it, folks.
Subject. Have you talked to Vladimir Putin about the fact that yesterday a big U.S. factory was hit in a Russian airstrike in Ukraine? What's your reaction to that?
I told him I'm not happy about it. And I'm not happy about anything having to do with that war. I settled 7 wars.
And
so he actually claimed that he spoke to Putin, or either he slipped his words up there or something. But it sounds like he told Putin he wasn't happy about it. So here's my thing on this one, folks. That had to be intentional. Like the multiple caliber Russian missiles going all the way over to the Hungarian border, which is where this plant was. It was in Ukraine on the Hungarian border, literally in the most western part of Ukraine possible, and it was struck multiple times. And the workers in the plant barely had enough time to get out, and there was also multiple injured people that worked there at the plant. So it was not a secret or a mystery that it was an American plant. So how can we possibly write that off as an accident or something just merely to say, oh, whatever? Like, to me, you just can't write stuff like that off. That's quite serious. It was intended to send a message and see how the U.S. was going to respond to it. And our response is certainly not the response you'd want to give to Russia, because Russia only understands strength. As everybody likes to always say, that's all they ever understand. So if you respond with weakness, that's basically telling Vladimir Putin, go right ahead and do whatever the hell you want, because we're not going to do anything about it. So that's not a good message to send.
Also, yesterday, just to remind you all of this before we get into the next one, yesterday, the president stated this: "It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports to have a fantastic defense, but is not allowed to play offensive. There is no chance of winning. It is like that with Ukraine and Russia, blah, 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 blah." Generally suggesting that Ukraine goes on the offensive because of the president's aggravation with the Russians yesterday. Now, last night, to remind you all, just to go over here to Ukraine and show all of you all this really quickly, the Ukrainians hit the Druzhba pipeline pumping station at Onechta in the Bryansk Oblast, right there. generally just about 8 hours after that tweet was made. Then the president today has now stated, after he insinuated that the Ukrainians should go on the offensive, the Ukrainians attacked a pumping station in Bryansk, which could be taken as going on the offensive. Now the president is saying that he's not happy with the Ukrainians attacking a pipeline. And also Putin might visit the United States a second time in the future. So that is what it is. Anyways, moving on from that, I'm gonna be honest with you folks. I'm just gonna hold my comments on that. Wouldn't really help if I said anything about it. It is what it is. So interesting. Moving on out of the United States and on into the English Channel, we did get to hear that a British Navy vessel was escorting a Russian ship that happened to pass through the English Channel earlier today, and it does appear that that vessel was a Russian destroyer, the Vice Admiral Kulikov, and 2 tankers that were also passing by as well. So outside of that, we also were able to hear other developments, with the Polish preparing for their military parade along the Vistula River, which we're going to see in this clip right here, with Euro pop music. I don't know.
Euro papa.
But we can see the Leopard 2 PLs and the Rosamax and the Abrams.
Poland's doing a great job, I tell you what. Raising their defense spending up to 5%. It's already high. It's already in the 4s. So now it's jumping up to the 5s, at least in the near future. So that's pretty solid right there. Poland is like that military powerhouse. I got to say, like, Poland has a beautiful military. Like, they truly do. Some say the best.
Some say the greatest, some say the most wonderful. But moving on from that, we also got to hear that the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense has also put out some statements on the Zapad. Here's what they said. Timescale, August to September of 2025. Active phase from the 12th to 16th of September of 2025. Participants, 30,000. And that seems off. But they also stated that the exercise would be happening in specific areas in Russia, the Moscow and Leningrad military districts, the Kaliningrad Oblast, the Barents Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the Arctic. And then when it came to speaking about where the military exercises were happening in Belarus, it was just Belarus. No extra details given, and I'll show you why in a second. The goals are to test and display the readiness of the Russian army, all that crap. And the key activities are, of course, normal wartime activities. Now, let's look at the map. Now, what they're showing in Belarus is a little bit interesting, and wouldn't y'all all agree? Because it looks like most, if not all, of the ground military exercises, number 10 and number 8, are happening right near Vilnius and also the Lithuanian border. And more importantly, the one number 8, which is happening at Gozha, that is literally right on the Lithuanian border. No joke. This is the largest part of the military exercise, and it's going to be conducted in these fields right here. The northernmost end is literally 3/4 away, 3/4 of a mile away from the Lithuanian border. So I think the Lithuanians might be downplaying this whole thing on this post to make it seem like it's not that big of a deal. Because we know that the number of Russian armed forces involved in the Zapad are going to be a lot larger than the Russians are publicizing or the Lithuanians. Practically everyone's saying, including us, that the number is going to be around 110,000, and that seems that that's certainly going to be the case.
Honestly, every single one of my sources that I've seen so far, which is think tanks, also we got other organizations in the government in D.C., everybody is predicting this is going to be 100 to 150,000 men between Belarus and Russia. Lithuania appears to be the only entity or country saying that it's going to be 30,000, and with the Russians saying it's going to be 15,000, and that's the propaganda number that the Russians are putting out. I'm not really sure what Lithuania is doing here. I even asked them in their tweet right there. You can see I wrote a tweet to them to ask them where they were getting that information from. Of course, they didn't respond because I wasn't expecting a response, but at least I asked to see if they would respond to it. Of course, no response was given, but I don't know where they're getting that from, and they didn't provide the source either in their post. So they're contradicting everybody, which I tend, honestly, not to believe.
I don't really believe this either. This seems to be an incredibly low number. And to remind you all, before the invasion of Ukraine in 2021, the Zapad 2021 military exercise was 250,000 strong. Quite literally the exact size of the invasion force for Ukraine. And from what we're hearing by most people this year, this Zapad is going to be about 110 to 150,000 strong, which is the exact amount of forces that would be needed to take and hold the Suwalki Gap and also conduct offensives further on north through Lithuania and Latvia, with another offensive most likely breaking through the Estonian defenses at Narva as well as the small plain seen near the city of Pskov. So with that, I hope that does address it the best we can on that end. And moving on from that and on into Moscow, we also got to hear that apparently the Institute for the Study of War, by the way, big shout out to them. They actually followed us on Twitter today. Hey, great to see the Institute of the Study of War appreciates what we do. We appreciate what they do greatly. Their analysis is always tops. But outside of that, it also appears, Mandy, that they were shown on Fox today as a source of military analysis. Hey, look at that! The mainstream sometimes recognizes reels, like the Institute for the Study of War. But beyond that, we were able to hear that the Institute for the Study of War believes that the comments escalated concern that Putin's ultimate war aim is the control of Kyiv rather than physical occupation of all of Ukraine, which Russian forces have been unable to achieve. Lavrov said the Kremlin's goal is to protect Ukrainians from their own government and argued there can be no talk of any long-term agreements with Kyiv without respect for Russia's security and the rights of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, the Institute for the Study of War reported this week. So it does appear that generally the idea is still that the Russians are going for complete control of Ukraine and not just a limited territorial area like the Donbass. Outside of that, we also were able to see that prices for gas are skyrocketing in the Russian Federation. This was a picture taken today from the area around Tula. And if you look at those
gas
prices,
is looking very expensive. I tell you what, very expensive. They say that despite Russian median salary only being 20% of that of Americans, it's rising prices. That is crazy though, if you really think about it. Let's see here, Enforcer. Let's pull up real quick what the average Russian salary is in USD to get an idea of exactly how much this gas price, with it being equivalent to US prices now. Let's see what that is in comparison to their actual income.
so their average income, at least according to the AI overview, is somewhere around 6,000 to 10,000 US dollars per month. Sorry, correction. That actually would be incorrect. Let me go put that in the currency calculator.
I'm looking at it right now. It looks like 60,000 Russian rubles is 750 US dollars a month. So in America, if you're filling up your car and you have an economical vehicle, you'll usually spend, if you're driving to work or something like that, usually about $100 to $150 a month in gas if you're being conservative. So that is a huge portion of the Russian monthly wage right there. It's going towards gas, and theirs was not set up for that. Like, it really wasn't. That's why they can't pay U.S. prices for gas. But now that's the prices, which is insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. I guess it's a little interesting. Tucker Carlson hasn't come over here and talked about how cheap the gas was. Why is that? Why doesn't he take a second trip? Hell, rent a car, see how cheap it is. But anyways, still, something to know. While some areas of the country are completely without gas, the ones that are left with gas, the gas has gotten so expensive it's equivalent to American prices per gallon. So with that, it's time for us to move on into the rest of our news, which is taking us on into the front lines in Ukraine, or at least the areas that we have not covered yet. Moving us on down into the location unknowns, we were able to see some pictures put out today of Ukrainian special forces. These are clean.
Those do go hard. Snipers right there.
Feel free to screenshot. Also posted by Preston Tewart. Great fellow. He follows us on Twitter. We like to see it. Moving on from that, we also got to see a MALD. The Ukrainians have a MALD. These are decoy missiles.
Wow, look at that.
These are neat. They have a range of 550 miles.
Wow.
Pretty cool. Outside of that, we also get to see the Russian casualty report as well, and the losses were not as high as most days. They're actually getting a little bit low in some categories. But beyond that, Misty Sakira, the record, stated that lowest personnel loss since April of 2024, and 318 drones is the new second highest daily loss of the war. So nearly a new record in some categories, but in terms of troop losses, we're reaching record lows, at least for this year nearly. And so with that, let's get on into the numbers. 790 Russian soldiers have been wounded over the past 24 hours and killed, along with 3 APCs, 110 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 46 artillery pieces, 318 drones, 1 MLRS, 33 cruise missiles, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. In general, it does appear that the losses are incredibly decent. The troop losses are dropping, however, and that may be suggesting a decrease in Russian offensive activities on most areas of the front. Moving us on into a brief glimpse into the town of Vavchansk, we were able to see what it's looking like currently after nearly a year and a half of battle over the area.
Oh, that's not looking good. That place has been basically razed to the ground. That's a sad sight to see that, like, honestly. Like, you know it gets this way because they've shelled the whole place to hell and back, but when you really see it, it's terrible. This was once a functioning place, and now it's just rubble.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
You really can't even tell really where anything was anymore at this point. Like you can see just vague outlines of rubble, assuming a building was there, but even the trees are stripped of all the leaves, bark, and everything. That's just rough.
And honestly, man, this area has been at least devoid of artillery fire enough. A lot of it's actually becoming overgrown. Actually, I can tell y'all where this is. That is the old aggregate plant. Let me go see if I can show y'all that here in the city of Vavchansk. What y'all are seeing on the clip right here is this area that you're seeing on the satellite right here. That is the same compound. You can see the central building, which has a taller frame to it. It's several stories tall. It dominates the skyline this area. You can tell by the shadow being projected by the building. That is what is left of the aggregate plant. Also notice the overgrowth around the area. This whole area used to be covered in concrete and roads. Now it's generally covered in overgrowth and grass.
Yeah, it must have been sitting there for quite some time then. You must be right.
Yeah, this appears to just be the onset of complete urban decay is the best way to explain it. The fighting has pretty much moved to the northern side of the city, so that's where most of the artillery fire and damage is coming from these days. And the Ukrainians have pretty much pushed the Russians entirely out of the town. So this area behind the lines, it's not safe enough to rebuild it yet, so it's just been sitting here, kind of rotting away and decaying. And this is what it's looking like nowadays. But it's really crazy because look at this. You can see the surrounding area. That's what's left of the Vavcha River, which is this tiny little stream around right here. You can also see that little bridge, that roadway right here, and the bridge right there that existed right near to the aggregate plant. So this is the exact area. There were once houses and all sorts of parks around this area. All of them completely gone. The trees that were once in that park, completely gone as well.
Just unfortunate.
Really a wild thing.
Also, what were the Ukrainians doing filming this? Or were they just trying to get like evidence of what the Russians did to it, or were they looking for if Russians were still here?
Generally, they're just showing what the town's looking like. It's kind of like some free time with the battery charge on the drone from a recon mission, so they just kind of took a look around and showed what it looked like. So that's generally what we're seeing at the moment. But outside of that, we do have another question for all of y'all. Considering that about 62% of Americans are supporting aid to Ukraine, why is the change happening? What's going on with that, Matthew? And what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so just for some context here, there has been some recent polling that came out because, of course, the Ukraine topic is very divisive these days. It became political, even though it's literally supporting our European allies. So, it became political anyway. But the numbers of Americans that now support more aid to Ukraine has suddenly jumped up to 62%. It was sitting somewhere around the 40s and 50s, and now all of a sudden it's jumped up to a whopping 62%, and it looks like it's rising every single week. So why are Americans suddenly now supporting more aid to Ukraine, even after all the political statements that have been made pretty much against Ukraine by a good amount of people? So 54% said Americans do not like Putin's attitude, and that's turned most Americans away from Russia, or at least trying to support Russia, while 27% said people are waking up to World War III fears, and 12% said Americans are just following the politics. And I'll be honest with y'all, most Americans are just following the politics. That's the honest answer. The politicians are changing their tune a little bit, though the one group of people that were generally anti-Ukraine are now becoming slightly more pro-Ukraine because of the messaging that's coming out. So I'm not going to complain about that. All we want is Ukraine to be supported. That's what we should do as an American country, is support our allies in Europe, and Ukraine is one of those allies. So even though it's aggravating to see people really not using critical thinking here, they're just following what they're told by politicians. At least they're making a positive change, at least from what we're seeing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that it most likely is because of people following the political atmosphere. I would have to go the 12% actually. Generally because nobody really thinks freely a lot in the country anymore. Like they just kind of follow whatever they're told. So if a like to be honest with y'all folks, if a politician told folks that it was in their best interest to go jump off a bridge, you would start seeing an increase of people jumping off bridges. That's just how it works in America these days. It's really stupid. But that's how a lot of people think, and that's how a lot of people behave these days. It's not really about thinking for themselves and what's good for them or what's good for the country. It's more so about letting someone else think for them and then just tell them what to do. And if they're told to jump, they jump. That's really how it works for a lot of people these days. So I would say that that's the reason why a lot of the support is increasing, is that there are just to be completely honest, there's more Republicans that are saying that there is a reason to support the war in Ukraine. So a lot of people who once were not for it are now becoming fans of it just because they were told that now it's a good thing. Not that there's any real argument that they believe in that makes it a good thing. It's just that someone said it's a good thing, so now it's a good thing. That's just kind of how it's working. That's kind of how, like, that's honestly how it works on everything, though. Like, if y'all have critically looked at the last 4 years alone, that's literally how everyone does everything. That's not just to make this clear, folks, that's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. That's just a nationwide issue with people who are really political. They do not think for themselves. They let their politicians that they pretty much worship tell them what to believe, and then they just do it. So that
honestly, it's a bit of a disappointment because it's not just limited to one side. Because here's the odd thing, folks. There are actually legitimately, because I know most people don't go around asking probably about, oh, what do you think about Ukraine in like real life? Most people obviously have lives, they got to go to work, things like that, so they don't have time to do that. But with just us interacting with people and seeing people, there are so many Americans out there that truly believe that Russia is somehow an ally of the United States and that Putin is a good leader. There are legitimately Americans that really think that, and they truly full-heartedly believe it, which is astonishing because we've literally been enemies with the USSR and then Russia, the subsequent state, for decades. Like, it's not a new thing. We've been enemies with them for a long time, but yet somehow Americans believe that Russia is a true ally. So that's crazy on one side of the aisle, but also at the same time, there are some people that will support Ukraine. And of course, nobody on this channel, because everybody here knows what's going on, which you are obviously watching for a reason. But there are some people that support Ukraine that don't even really have a clue why they're supporting it either. They don't really know the real reason behind it, except for it's trendy. So, you know, it's kind of like a weird situation all the way around. There's a lack of education around this topic, and obviously we don't know everything about it, but at least most people here on the channel know exactly why we're doing it. It's because we need to make sure that Putin is stopped before he moves on to a NATO country. But most people don't even know why. If you ask somebody, why should we support Ukraine, that does support Ukraine, they would say something like, it's the right thing to do, and that would be the end of it, and they wouldn't really have anything beyond that to say.
I also see some people saying some stuff. Like someone said, the current president said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any followers. That's like true, though. Like, that's true for everyone right now in politics. Anyone could do anything heinous and people will still follow them because it's not about whether what they're doing is right or not. It's just about following someone for the sake of following them. That's how it works these days. That's not even just something particular to him. That literally applies to anyone in politics right now. Like we can't even say it because people are so deeply ingrained in it. Like a small minority of people, even here on this channel, we can't even say it about just everyone across the board because people are going to start going crazy that we're saying that, you know, Democrats and Republicans are fallible people and that they are flawed and that there are a lot of questionable things that some people in these parties have done. So we can't even touch it on air with a 10-foot pole. But there are so many situations where you can look at people that are in both of these parties and see that they're doing absolutely questionable things. And nobody, like, when they're doing it, whoever supports them, it's completely justified, even if it is illegal. Well, you know, someone somewhere did something wrong at some point. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, so, you know, it's happy hour for them. They get to run the system and have it their way. But then when someone else says, oh, how dare they, they're evil, wicked people, they're run by the demons from underground, and, you know, it's a terrible thing. And it's just a absolute tragedy because, honestly, it's a good thing that more people are supporting Ukraine. But honestly, how it works in this country, half of the people who were already supporting Ukraine didn't even know why they were supporting Ukraine, and now this increase of people who are supporting Ukraine, they don't even know why they're supporting Ukraine either. And then the people who are against Ukraine, they don't even know why either. Like, most people have no clue why they're even for or against anything on either end because they just don't know. They're just told to do something or told to believe something, and they follow it. And
Exactly. Also, Enforcer, Siri asked in the live chat, she said, and it's a good question, very good question, because it's confusing to me until you learn the reality of it. Siri said, why do people in the U.S. think that Russia is truly an ally of the United States? And the sole answer is this: it is purely because of the modern information war that Russia is waging on the United States through social media. They have bots just like China has bots, and they send them out like crazy. We sometimes see them here in the chat, and you'll see them on many different other platforms as well. And they love to put out short form content. That's the main way they indoctrinate people, is through short form content. So when you're flicking through there, like they call it doom scrolling, you're scrolling through these short videos on TikTok, etc., they are slowly introducing, the Russians are, by putting out mass numbers of shorts. They're showing Americans that soft Russian propaganda, and some of it is more hardcore Russian propaganda. That's just straight up propaganda. And the people that are not educated on the topic, they tend to fall for it because the Russians are very smart about it and they know how to perform these psychological operations. And they start fooling people into thinking that Putin somehow just misunderstood. They humanize him, they make him look like a good guy. And of course, they don't mention all the murdering that he does as the leader of Russia, because he literally sanctions murders every single day in Ukraine. So they don't get that part. And also they have the bots in the comments. So people are basically just being brainwashed by social media because of these foreign countries putting this content onto our American social media platforms. And that is the sole reason why. And it's mainly because of ignorance that it gets a hold and starts really turning people to that side.
I would have to say that one of the issues, at least in my opinion, with how the Russians have fooled people into thinking that they're friends, is that in America there is a really there's an interesting way that everyone works propaganda around the world, especially the Russians and the Chinese. And whenever you open up your eyes to it, you can see the kind of influence that they're having propaganda-wise on the country. Because just to be entirely honest, as far as how propaganda and polarization is working, the Chinese aim their propaganda more towards left-leaning political groups, and the Russians aim their propaganda towards right-leaning political groups. The Chinese go off of more of an economic principle. Look at all these billionaires. Look at how great China is. These billionaires are wicked and crooked. That's why you'll need to install an authoritarian governmental system in your country to get rid of these billionaires and create a socialist utopia like us in China. We're like 50 years ahead of y'all. Y'all are stupid and poor and ignorant because of these wicked capitalists. That's what the Chinese generally, their propaganda works off of. The Russians, on the other hand, work their propaganda to try and massage the more so right-leaning people. Look at the social degeneracy in your country and how backwards it is. We have a strong authoritative leader that puts these wicked moral degenerates in their place in camps, pretty much. Y'all ought to install an authoritarian government in your country to put morals back in the country, because look at Putin. He's a moral man. He's a family man. And the Russian people are good, honest people, real people. Like they go through this whole charade, and then when you look at Russia, it's not even the case. Like they sit there and like Russian propaganda in America, they'll be like, get rid of the freeloaders. Freeloaders are for the weak, and Russia's a welfare state. Like, you know, it's like they're completely the antithesis of the propaganda they're presenting in America. Putin's not a family man. He has a new woman in his house every single day or every hour. But he's not a family man. There are a load of things in Russia. Like, for example, the fact that most of Russia is atheist. Completely different than the propaganda they try and portray, where Russia is a true Christian Chad cell country, or whatever they say in the propaganda. It just doesn't line up. Like the Chinese propaganda, it doesn't line up either. But all they're doing is taking advantage of well-intentioned Americans that are wanting to improve the country, but they don't know how, and then they end up listening to the poison of the communist Chinese, or pretty much the fascist Russians, on how to improve the country, which are neither the answer on how to improve this nation. That's really the truth.
And they're
of what
smart
it
about
is.
it. They're very smart about it. They know exactly what topics to hit that has basically a soft point in the political standing of certain Americans. They know exactly how to attack some people when it comes to an information war type of warfare, and they attack that spot like you're talking about. Like with certain like right-leaning folks, there's a certain hot button issue that they know to push, and they know to go for that one. And they have people that literally study that. China has it, Russia has it, the U.S. has it as well, but we do it in a little bit of a different way here in America. We don't do it quite the same as Russia does it, but they know exactly what button to push. They go for it, and they go for it very hard. And it turns out it works damn good, because look how many people in America believe Russia's a good country.
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, well, look at how many people think China's a good country. I mean, on the flip side, there's a lot of people who think China's 50 years ahead of us because they put LEDs on a skyscraper.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. It's crazy stuff. I also saw someone say well-intentioned, more like dumb and uneducated. Well, I mean, you know, people who are ignorant, not sitting here and like dissing or wanting to take a shot at them. People who are ignorant are well-intentioned. It's just that they don't know how to cultivate or develop a well-intentioned mindset that actually works for everyone in the country and doesn't involve burning the whole thing to the ground and executing a couple of million people. That's kind of the issue. Because when you look at the well-intentioned, ignorant people on both sides, on the left or right, each one of their solutions requires executing tens of millions of people and installing an authoritarian regime that's either more socialist-leaning or more fascist-leaning of either variety. It quite literally is like any other point in American history over the last century where there's a communist party and a fascist party in the country. It's pretty much the same thing today. It's just that it's slightly different in been evolved than what we used to see. So, but also it seems as though it's catching on a good bit more, because I think they're starting to win on the propaganda game a little bit better than they have in other times in history. And also a lot of politicians have learned that instead of generally fighting this kind of foreign influence like we would have done back in the day from both the communists and the fascists, if they lean into it, they can get a little bit farther with their political careers. So that's kind
Well,
of
no,
where...
they're exacerbating it, because the reason why it's taking such a hold right now is because the people that are sort of uneducated on these issues, they're people that are also tend to be on the angry side of things. They tend to want to rage bait. They tend to want to get angry because I'll be honest, the country is having a certain political environment now, and also some political issues which are making people very testy, very polarized, very testy, and very quick to get angry. So it doesn't take much for the Russians to put something like a rage bait out there, like for example, let's just say a short video about the deep state and how they're trying to screw you out of your voting rights or something. That one thing right there, they can throw that out there as a short form content and replicate that thousands of times over and put that out there over and over and over and spam it. And enough of those people that are uneducated will see that, they will get rage baited by it, they'll get angry, and that's just enough to hook, line, and sinker them right into the Russian propaganda, because they're already so damn mad, they're just looking for something to go off on. So they go off on that, and then the Russians got them from that point forward. They are now officially radicalized, essentially, against their own country.
Yeah, I would agree. But on the same flip side, they'll still say, "Oh, I love my country," and then hate everything about it. Also, I see some people saying, one more thing before we move on, because we still got a lot to cover. I see some people saying, "Well, I'm left leaning or I'm right leaning, and I'm not brainwashed." Well, I mean, this audience here on this channel is an incredibly discerning audience. I'll be entirely honest with y'all. About half of the audience here on this channel leans right, and about half leans left. We don't get into domestic politics, so we're probably one of the few channels out there that has that kind of an audience split, where half of it's kind of right leaning, half of it's kind of left, and there's some people down the middle. But the thing is, folks, is that a lot of people aren't like y'all. A lot of people are not discerning. A lot of people don't look for deep analysis, information, and news every day. They look at TikTok headlines, Instagram headlines, Snapchat shit, whatever they're pouring out. Like, it's absolutely terrible garbage. And they look at that, and that's how they formulate their opinions. It's not really that deep. It's not really that knowledgeable. It's not really that well informed. I mean, I would be entirely honest with y'all. I really do respect a great deal of our audience, whether you're right leaning or left leaning. We never get into that here on the channel, and we never really want to or make that a point of discussion in the chat. I find all of y'all, whatever your political affiliation seems to be pretty well discerning. But that's not most people. Like, most people in this country are not that discerning and don't come up to their conclusions and have such a good formulated argument for such a thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of our news from inside of Ukraine. Starting off, we were able to hear that there was another large Ukrainian drone attack overnight that was largely attacking the Don region of the Russian Federation, and we were able to see that about 2 days after the Novoshitinsk attack, the refinery is still on fire. A satellite actually caught a picture of the ongoing fire at the refinery. Moving on from that, we also were able to see that the water crisis in the occupied Donetsk regions is still continuing.
They're getting the water out of a PVC pipe? That doesn't seem right.
Like, pretty rough. But they're having to get the water while they can, from anywhere.
I don't know where that water's coming from.
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. Like, honestly, where is it coming from?
Water.
Bro, that's that mystery juice. But nevertheless, we also get to see, unfortunately, the Russians did bomb Konstantinivka today with a large fab. It ended up causing several wounded, and the Ukrainians were able to stabilize the situation of the wounded. None of them died, but the explosion was pretty crazy, and it was almost unbelievable to believe anyone survived this.
Damn. That's a big-ass explosion.
I'd say. Moving on from that and down to the area of Novobad-Makivka, we also get to see more Russians getting slammed by the Ukrainian Rubicon forces. Possibly named after the Rubicon in Rome this time, instead of the Rubicon Trail in California.
Could be named after the Rubicon Jeep, 4x4, like off-road, outdoors, bro, type stuff.
Man, honestly, bruh. Honestly, bruh.
Looks like they're going that old, I don't even know where I was going to go with that, so I'll just stop.
Man, honestly, I didn't. I was sitting there. I was like, I don't even know how to pick that up and take it and do something with it. I was like, I don't even know either.
Sometimes you just got no one to hold them and you got no one to fold them, and I just folded.
Know when to walk away and know when to run. But anyways, moving on from that and down to the southern Zaporizhia region, we also get to see a rare use of a Leopard 1 in southern Ukraine. Pretty cool, actually. We rarely ever see Leopard 1s in use in terms of picture and video evidence. So this is one of the few times we were able to see it. And that's also bore sighting, that's not technically bore sighting. This is trying to make sure that the gun aligns with the gunner's sight. That's what they're doing right now. So with that, we are moving on. Well, technically, I guess the best way to explain what that was in the last picture, that's technically calibration to make sure that where the scope for the gunner is looking is where the tank's main gun is actually firing. And that's probably the best way to explain the process that they were doing there at the end of that. But moving on from that and down into the area of Kherson, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians were hitting some Russian positions. And of course, fires were breaking out as usual.
Он уже и вертовой пошел. Все.
Down deep in every Russian soul, they see this fire and they think, let it burn, blядь, let it burn.
Man.
You have to have that iron in you.
Oh no. Oh no.
Really though, it does take some iron just to let that fire burn like that. Because you know it's hot as hell standing that close to it.
But Russians are like arsonists, dude. They're like moths to a flame. They see a fire, they gotta get close.
Honestly.
Так а все, Леха, на...
We also got to see that in the midst of the night, the Ukrainians ended up actually taking some Russian prisoners from some of the islands.
Oh, they brought them to the red light district as punishment.
No! No! You will now be subjected to moral degeneracy of the wicked wayward ways of the West. No, please, блядь!
Херсонський напрямок. Лежать тепленькі ще. Готуються.
You know, Lavrov would love this treatment right here because there's hay on the ground, and I think he would be in hog heaven.
Like, that's what, bro. But that's the end of that clip. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on down into Crimea, as we were able to hear that a Russian drone base was also destroyed by the Ukrainians overnight.
Oh, this is that hit that they did on the air base down there near the Black Sea Fleet. This must have been the new video that came out from it. So they ended up hitting the headquarters or something? What did they hit?
They ended up hitting an airfield that was being used as a drone operating base.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw the hits on the air base the other day in the short war video, but we didn't get the on-the-ground footage yesterday. So that's interesting. Hit the drone base on the airfield. That's interesting.
And we also got to see here, at least, that there were 10 explosions near to the Ilsky and Opfitsky refineries in Krasnodar Krai, although we are still waiting to get more additional information on that and also damage assessments in terms of video and picture evidence. But with that, folks, now 2 hours into the news segment, that is the news. Like, I was trying to make sure to drop that to all of y'all, drop the bombshell, but that's the news. There's no speech from Zelensky. I don't know how in the world to do this transition every night. Like, we've been doing this for almost a week continuously now. I still don't know how to actually do that smoothly, but it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this night where we get to talk to all of y'all. I'm so sorry that we don't get speeches from Zelensky a lot, at least over the past week. I really do want to have a proper transition, and also, folks, that serves as a ability or a chance for me to be able to go to the restroom and get some water. That has not existed for me for a straight week, so I just got to power through the rest of the stream. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and it's time for us to move on to the next segment. So, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so moving on here, and also, by the way, Zelensky, if you can hear us, Zelensky, please, we want those speeches. Like, seriously, honestly, I actually listen to the speeches, every time he does them. He usually drops a nugget of information in there, throughout the speech, which usually tells us exactly what's happening diplomatically behind the scenes. So, I miss the speeches. I don't just need it for intermission. I want some actual speech. I really do want it. So, hopefully Zelensky gets back to it, because usually he was very, very, very diligent with coming out with those speeches. He's been traveling a lot this week, so that might have held him up, but hopefully he doesn't jump off the schedule there, because we need those speeches. But anyways, jumping into our final question segment of the night, it is now time to jump back into our super chat questions, our live chat questions, and our Morse code decoders of the stream. And our first super chat goes to LC39A yet again. He threw in another super chat, by the way, and a huge thank you to LC39A, by the way, for throwing in that massive support every single night. We do appreciate that. And he said, Americans like a good underdog.
You know, they do actually, LC39A. Americans like a good underdog story. And I got to thank you massively for the support. And hopefully, you like the underdog story of Ukraine, because it is a very interesting underdog story. But let me go and get that specific graph that was put out on our Twitter that was talking about the results of Americans and whether they support the war or not. I think it was on up towards the top of our Twitter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So let me see if I can find that really quickly and show it to all of y'all. The actual results that came in from the polling. Here we are.
Also, when you grab it, listen. Who was the pollster, by the way? I can't recall who it was.
It was Chicago Council surveys.
Okay, yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, so here we are. This is it. So, as you can see, the dark blue, navy blue line was overall support. The blue line is Democrat support. The red line's Republican. And then you can see right here the independent in yellow, straw yellow, or piss yellow, whichever you prefer. But we can see that generally the independents were kind of following along, like just pretty much directly correlating to the dead average, just a few points lower most of the time. We could see that support is kind of ebbed and flowed for Democrats, and then the Republicans generally were heavily in support of the war when it first started, tanked once their folks told them that it wasn't really a big thing, really tanked, and then they've rebounded up to 51%, which is actually the highest it's been ever since about the latter part of 2022 and the early part of 2023. So the overall support's now risen to 62%. So y'all can see
that is nuts, though. Like if you look at the very beginning of the graph back in March of 2022, that and once again, folks, I'm not getting political, so please don't take it that way. But the Republicans were supporting Ukraine a hell of a lot more than even the independents were. And the Democrats have always had higher support for Ukraine, because that tends to be an issue they lean heavily on, is that with foreign policy. So that was interesting. At the very beginning, they were almost tied, but it quickly dropped off, though, because it became a political issue almost immediately, which was a shame.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy with that. Basically, just to put this out there to folks, everyone in the country was pretty much in agreement. It was 80% as an overall average amongst all three groups, the independents, the Democrats, and the Republicans, that the support to Ukraine was a necessity. As soon as the handlers on one party said it was a bad idea, it practically dropped over the next 8 months to half, which is a little bit crazy to see, because y'all will also see that on anything else. And I wish we could bring it up. YouTube doesn't allow me to bring up the other one, but it's on everything like that. Like I can bring up an example like this, but where it was the Democrats on other issues. Like it's a little bit crazy. Like, not to make a political. Well, of course, this is as neutral as we can make it. It's actually critiquing both sides, because this could have ended up being the Democrats or the Republicans either way. Just to be completely frank with y'all, if a Republican was the president when the war started, this graph would have been the complete inverse, and it would have been the Democrats that dropped significantly in the first 8 months to say it was a bad idea. Like, that's how it works, because whoever's in charge and whatever they do in the modern day, it's a terrible idea. It doesn't matter if it's a good idea or an actual bad idea. It's always a bad idea. So one party will completely hate something and the other one will love it. And it's weird how that works these days, because there is one, it kills me, folks, that I can't bring it up, because it's like one of the biggest things to happen this decade. You know what I'm talking about, Matthew. And at one moment, everyone hated this one thing, and then overnight, the election happened, the presidency changed, and then one party became all for something, and then the other party completely dropped off and hated it, although they loved it.
Right, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like,
believe it or not, though, that issue is actually as bipartisan as it gets, which we can't even name the topic, because if we even name the topic, it could get the video completely taken down. So we can't even mention it. It's kind of a shame, but that topic there, it relates to the whirlybird, by the way, and the solution to the whirlybird. It relates to that. That issue is actually as bipartisan as the issues get when it comes to that whole situation with the whirlybird, because both parties were saying generally go for the solution. They supported the solution, which was weird in itself, but I can't say any more than that.
Yeah, also I see someone said just to address it really quickly, Uncle Sam said modern Democrats would never support Russia. That's not the reason why their war support would have dropped if the situation had been reversed and a Republican president would have been president when the war started. The argument, like you always have to remember that this sort of thing will happen. It's just that the arguments would be different, because it is true. Like as far as how it works with the propaganda stuff these days on what different groups believe ideologically, the Democrats would never align with the Russians at all, ever. But the thing is that they would have been heavily against the war because if it had been started under a Republican president, the argument would have been that this Republican president is a warmonger, he's shoving everyone towards World War III. You know, wars are bad. You know, we love to put daisies in the barrels of guns. This whole war has to stop because this guy is a bastard and he's a Republican. Therefore, it's all his fault and has nothing to do with anything else. That would have been the argument. Like that would have been the argument. The argument instead, however, because a Democrat was the president from the Republicans that made their support drop off, is that this is some sort of a scam thing. You know, it started as a money laundering deal, something along those lines. So therefore, we can't support the war. But either way, though, it's going to work within the ideological framework of the two sides. But this sort of a thing would have been reflected equally. I wish we could create alternate realities to show that, but it's really a shame that people at the beginning, like everyone knew it was a terrible thing and it was worthwhile to support Ukraine. Everyone knew that. But then once people started to say what you were supposed to believe, then that's when we saw that everyone started to disagree. It's really a shame that people don't think for themselves, you know, like not making a jab at one party or the other. It's really both of them, at least the large majority of their followers. It's really a shame that they don't think for themselves, because if they did, the country would be a lot better off. But, you know, it is what it is. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving into our super chats once again, a huge shout out to LC39A for that support, that massive support once again. And moving on to our second super chat here, this one goes to Marion Demert, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you, Marion, as well, for that very generous support. And Marion said, for the pizza fund or whatever you both enjoy, and thank you for the channel.
Hey, and thank you so much, Marion Deemer, for the pizza fund or whatever we enjoy. I personally do like pizzas, but recently I've started to like deli sandwiches a good bit. I think deli sandwiches are tops. I think they're pretty good. And so a big thanks to you for the support, Marion Deemer. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you for being a long-time channel viewer. And thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one. Also, by the way, I'm going to make a generalized comment here, not political, but I would say on the Ukraine issue, Ukraine specifically, I would say every politician that's ever had to deal with the Ukraine issue has not really approached it with the best solution in mind. Even way back in 2014, I saw someone mention the war going on since 2014. Obviously, you have the Crimea invasion back in the day and things like that. Nobody's really known how to properly handle the Ukraine situation because it's always a push and pull, a tug of war basically between not trying to go and cross the line with Russia because they're a nuclear power, but also trying to safeguard the interest of Europe. It's always been a little bit of a tight line to walk, and most politicians in the past have either gone way too conservative or they've gone way too open-ended when it comes to supporting Ukraine. One or the other. There's no like proper approach to it. The Crimea situation, I mean, they just basically took Crimea and that was the end of it. So that pretty much ended itself. And now before the current president took office, there was a slow walking of aid to Ukraine, which wasn't ideal either. And now all of a sudden there's a like roller coaster that we're on. We're not sure if we're supporting Ukraine one day or not supporting it the next. So it would be good just to have like the way that it should be approached is this. We should stand by Ukraine 100% because we should all be in agreement and take lessons from history here that if Putin is validated by invading Ukraine and being able to take the entire territory, then he is going to be emboldened to move further. History shows us that. And I think most people would agree with that are educated on history. So taking it from that perspective, there's no scenario which we should back off supporting Ukraine. We should always support Ukraine, but we don't want to do anything that just like sends us into a nuclear war right off the bat. So we need to keep the support to a reasonable level, but also not back off at the same time. If we approach it like that, it would be very simple, and it would be a lot easier to get this whole thing sorted out, basically, instead of this whole roller coaster that we're on.
Yeah, I would say I wish that it used to be like it was in the Cold War, where while the two political parties disagreed on domestic affairs, it was a unified front in foreign policy. The approaches were always the same. Like, look at them. Like tell me one Cold War president that did something different than another. None of them did. Kennedy, he faced down the Soviets, nearly got us into World War III facing them down. Generally, I think he made the right call back then. Not backing down was a smart move. Then you look at it right afterwards. Lyndon B. Johnson did not back down either. And then right after him, Nixon didn't back down. Neither did Ford. Neither did Reagan. None of them did. Clinton did. And Clinton was the last one that was around during the Cold War. None of them backed down once. Like, if there was any backing down done, it was done because we had pushed it to the very peak of what it could become without it being a third world war, and then the Russians would blink, and then that would allow us to blink, and then we'd work our way down into some sort of a compromise. Nobody ever just backed off and ran away with their tails tucked between their legs. Nobody did, because the foreign policy approach was unified. Everyone knew that you couldn't speak to the Russians like they were nice people. You had to speak to them from a position of strength. Also, I did miss Carter. Carter was, also I missed George H.W. Bush as well. They generally didn't do, there wasn't really a lot of situations they had to respond to with the Soviets during that time, a great deal. There were others that they were dealing with. And also George H.W. Bush, actually, George H.W. Bush was the last one around for the Cold War because the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, so it wasn't Clinton. Sorry, correction there. But all of them had a position of strength to deal with the Soviets whenever anything had to be dealt with, no matter their political affiliation. And that's the way we should still be dealing with them to this day. That's just the truth of it. Regardless of the domestic political matters, I mean, the domestic political matters, you can argue till the cows come home. There's no right answer on any of it. And before someone tells me that there is, if there was a right answer, everyone would agree with you on that, and they don't. So there is no right answer. It's all subject to opinion and your own moral philosophies. So with that in mind, why in the world do we act like because we disagree on things domestically, none of us can agree on foreign policy? I mean, we can all agree that America's interests are worth fighting for and worth protecting, so why not make sure to protect them over in Ukraine and show the Russians they won't even be able to get to threatening us because we'll stop them right at the head before they can even get the chance. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Honestly, I think the next merch we're going to do is it looks like a hat in red that says Matt is always right. I'm going to wear that hat every day, by the way. And also, on top of that, say what now?
I mean, I was going, I was like,
Man, I'll tell you, I mean, that sounds like it sounds humble to me. I mean, I think it'll be very humble. I mean, it's only facts. I mean, it's just facts. I mean, how can it be arrogant if it's just facts? I mean, I'm just saying. And also at the same time, though, I want to bring world leaders into my merch store. And I want to have them buy one of those hats and wear it because I think honestly that's a good thing to do. It's only the right thing to do to let them wear that hat because it's just generous to let them wear that hat like that. So I would say let them have it. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, by the way. I'm not that crazy. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here, this one goes to Cliff H. And Cliff puts in a $26 donation. Thank you very much, Cliff, as well, for that support. He said, I worry the West is not going to school appropriately on the Ukraine drone tactics, and Lithuania and Poland need a brigades of FPV drone operators and 100,000s of FPV drones with hardened operation centers to defend the gap.
Oh, I definitely agree on that. Drone development is something that we are pretty much wallowing in failure in right now in the West. We need to rapidly evolve drone forces, and we need to have mass-produced, cheap, relatively widely available drones for every unit. Every single unit, no matter what they are, whether they're motorized, mechanized, armored, hell, even combat aviation brigades and other kinds of logistical support brigades, all of them could benefit from the implementation of drone technology. It's been proven in Ukraine. It needs to be implemented on an industrial scale. And so with that, a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and I'd 100% agree with you on that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I was going to type it, but welcome back, Chef Danny B, by the way. I was about to type that, but I'll say it anyway because I couldn't get through typing and my fingers were cramping. So, hello, Danny. It's good to see you. And also, moving on here to our next super chat, this one goes to Old Warrior, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, as well, for that support. He said, Ukraine killed 2 birds with 1 stone. And Orban was selling refined products of Russian oil to the rest of the EU at a huge profit, and Ukraine took that off the table. And would he have had enough product to help Russia if it were not for this event?
He possibly could have, actually. It could be that really, honestly, the Hungarians were helping them by just buying up exorbitant amounts and then selling it around Europe. So they were already pretty much helping to financially float the Russians, in a sense, along with Slovakia. But now that the Unecha pumping station was knocked out on the Druzhba, that's pretty much been thwarted, at least for now. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support, Old Warrior, an old guard and a channel legend. I got to thank you for being here tonight and supporting this channel and helping you to keep on running. And, of course, asking a great question. I think that was a really good one. And so with that, huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Ross Nib. And thank you very much, Ross, for that support, by the way. 50 Australian, by the way, all the way from Australia. And we do appreciate it very much. And Ross said, how do you guys rate the Australian contribution of M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine? And have you seen any footage of those tanks in action yet?
I would rate it as an amazing contribution. M1 Abrams are very survivable for the crews. Now, they will not survive direct hits. They will get knocked out, but they are incredibly survivable for the crews nonetheless, which is the most important part of their design. So I'd say that it's a great contribution, but we've never seen an Australian-made M1 Abrams in service on the front just yet. So it still is primarily the first load of US M1A2s that were sent to Ukraine that are still being used, if any. But we have not seen the Australian ones pressed into service on the front yet. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. And also, thank you for being an Australian viewer, Ross, because you're actually asking particularly about your own country's support to Ukraine. And generally, I have to say it's a wonderful thing that they've done. It's just that we haven't seen it generally appear out there on the front lines yet as far as something that's being used. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a 20 this time. And thank you very much, Marion, for that second support of the night. And we do appreciate that from the longtime channel legend. And Marion said, Winter on Fire. That sounds like Disney on Ice.
Winter on Fire, Disney on Ice. But a big thanks to you.
Yeah, cease and desist for shovel for that comparison.
Oh, man, right now the rat's going, hit him! Like a demand. But anyways, beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Marion Deemer, and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep it rolling. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Andrew Barbro, and he puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support and also being another longtime channel legend. He said, going hard is watching, perceiving, understanding, and making your perception of the facts. And good day, good evening, and good night. And take one from the chat.
And thank you for the support, Andrew Barbaro. And I'd agree with you. And of course, good day, good evening, and good night. But I would have to say that it's certainly important that people have got to have some critical thinking skills. A lot of people don't have critical thinking skills. And I'll be honest with y'all, I don't really think that's ever going to change. With that in mind, I think it'd be better to let those people know, kind of go, well, like, not to make this sound incredibly crass, but I think it's important for society to kind of revert in this way, where folks who aren't incredibly bright are kind of told that in a politer way, like, you know, best to leave that to people who know a little bit more about it, sort of a deal. Because, not to say...
That makes them dig in deeper. Bad idea. Bad idea. It makes people dig in a lot deeper. The idea is to at least just try to give them hypothetical questions, which makes them challenge their beliefs. If you tell them they're wrong, oh gosh, bad decision. Bad decision. They're going to label you as the deep state, and they're going to dig in deeper.
No, not as grown adults. I mean, like, you know, like as kids, you know, like, see the ones who aren't particularly bright, you know, and like they used to back in the day, like back in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, be like, you seem to be not the sharpest tool in the shed, so probably best to leave it to the folks who are. You know, be like some people might say, oh, that'll give them confidence issues. Well, look, it's better to have someone who's not that confident in their intelligence when they really don't have any, rather than letting them be confident in being an idiot, just to be entirely frank. Because back at, like, a lot of, if you ever listen to interviews of people who were in World War II, they would just sit there and say, I wasn't really the smartest guy at all, so they put me in the infantry because I was kind of stupid. Like, they just knew that was them. Like, they were fine with that. Or they were like, oh, you know, I didn't really get into the whole politics thing because I wasn't really the brightest guy, so that just wasn't for me. Like, they'd say that because that was the way society grew people back then. You know, if you were smart, they would say, yeah, this guy's, like, actually pretty smart, chip off the old block. If you weren't, they'd be like, you might want to, you know, keep that in mind going forward. And I think that's...
I think it's still like that, honestly. I think it's still like that. I mean, if you say something really crazy, unless you're in an echo chamber or something, if you say something really crazy, like, for example, if I said something crazy on here right now that was like really like left field, like crazy, just came out of the blue, out of nowhere, most people would say something. They would call me out on it and say, yeah, I don't know about that. Sounds like a little bit wild. Like, it's happened before. We said things, each of us has said things before that people are like, I don't know about that. But that proves we're not an echo chamber, though. People are using critical thinking. But some places you go that are echo chambers, you can say something wild and people just buy it hook, line, and sinker because they're just looking for something to grab onto.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a decent sort of an idea to that. I also saw someone say, Someone said, "Okay, I'm out before I get angry." I don't know why that make you angry. You know what they say?
Oh.
There's an old Chinese proverb, Matthew: "Throw a rock into a crowd of dogs, and the one that yelps is the one that got hit." So I think that kind of applies right there.
That
But
sounds cruel.
well, it's there's a lot of there's a
Who
lot
throws
of
rocks at dogs?
there's a
Son
lot
a
of
sicko.
there's a lot of old Chinese proverbs, like the one who gets dropped in boiling oil is the one who screams. That sort of, all those sorts
That's
of
common
old,
sense.
yeah.
I tell you what, they're speaking facts.
And honestly, they kind of were. But let's see. I see some people saying, Misty says, at trade school or other labor they can excel at. I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of people that I went to college with. Well, not a lot of them. There was just a couple, and they really stuck out. A lot of them that didn't really have really good critical thinking skills. I mean, they did great in college, like on the academic side, but you could tell they were still not the brightest tool in the shed. I really think that just applies, that can apply to anyone. Like, there's some people who are really observant and can put two and two together, and there's some that can't. And it doesn't even matter whether they're in a vocational school or a trade school or a college or anything. There's just some people who are like that. And they might do good at something, but that does not mean that they have any deductive reasoning skills. Plenty of them don't. And it's really shocking to see, because you'll ask them about something and they don't know a damn thing about it, but they'll say they're really into it. And then when you ask them about it, they don't really know anything beyond the surface level. And I'm like, how the hell? How can you say you're really big into this and not know anything about it? That just seems to be counterintuitive. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I want to return back to Marion Super Chat real quick. She said Winter on Fire is a movie, which is on YouTube. So I thought it was a reference to Russia being on fire during the winter. So it's actually a movie, actually. So let's see what that is.
Let's see here. Winter on Fire. Oh. It's a documentary or kind of a movie about the Euromaidan uprising, or the Revolution of Dignity, it seems. Let me get it up here on screen.
Oh, wow, look at that. Well, honestly, it looks like it'd be pretty good based on the art's pretty good.
Yeah, the cover's pretty good to the show. That's actually pretty interesting. Pretty interesting overall. I remember seeing that back in the day on TV. I remember those little metal riot shields. You remember those, Matthew? They call up the police, and they just start beating them. Even through the shields, these guys were getting beat up, and they'd all run off. Yeah. It was a crazy thing to see when it was happening. And then not long afterwards, I remember that the little green men started popping up everywhere, and Crimea was annexed overnight, and all the battles started in the Donbass. It was a really interesting time back then. And just about a year or two after that, we actually had a Ukrainian foreign exchange student show up to our school. And so I started asking him a load about it. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then I bought a book about it and read about it. That's really where my interest came from in the whole thing. But still, thank you for the recommendation, Marion Deemer. I actually did not know that was a movie.
Go back to that little thing right there. It was the cover with all the words on it that you clicked on. Go down. Yeah, that right there. What were they saying? Let's say it said New York Times said, "Powerful, a vivid tale of heroism and villainy. Best documentary I've seen this year. A tour de force." Honestly, it's got some glowing reviews on it right there. And it's on Netflix. And you know what? I just remembered I have not canceled my Netflix subscription after I watched Squid Game, so I've been paying for it the whole time. So I ought to use it and watch it. It seems like it might be a good one.
Would you like some?
Man, I would like my subscription canceled. Honestly, I forgot about that. They've been taking my $7 every month.
Man, shoot, they've been taking mine. What the hell? But anyways, at that, we will look into that movie, and I thank you for the support and recommending that to us. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Danny B. And Danny puts in a $75 donation. And thank you very much, Danny, for that support, by the way. And it's good to see you once again, Chef Danny B. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And I was listening all night, and I was cracking up on the line while I was cooking when you played the propaganda video. And I'm going to go back and actually watch it."
Hey, you gotta watch that one, Danny B. That was hilarious. That one guy, too close to the grenade, honestly. Too close to the grenade in that hole. You gotta watch. It was hilarious. The whole thing was so funny. And then they showed the fat man a couple of times, too. A couple. But beyond that, I gotta thank you so much for the support, Danny B, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it rolling up until this very day. And so a massive, huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so, I gotta say, I hope you've been having a good time out there cooking and catering. And I also hope you've been having a good time on air tonight as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to JC Atkins. And thank you very much, JC, as well, for that support. And he puts in a 20. He said, tell us your thoughts on the Putin coup rumors from your favorite LSA Navy NCO. Honestly, I would say the fact that Putin wasn't even threatened whatsoever when he left for Alaska, if that was the real Putin, which I think it was, but some people out there say it wasn't without any evidence. But anyways, beside the point, I would say Putin getting ousted is slim to none because he is systematically still taking people out. We just heard about another guy getting taken out the other day, another oligarch that he took out. So anybody that even has an inkling of negative things to say about Putin that has any type of weight inside of Russia, they are instantly windowed. Like they don't even have the chance to really make it public. They just get windowed right off the bat. And then people are asking later, wait a minute, why'd that guy fall out of a window? And then later you find out, oh, he said something like, in private or something, and Putin heard about it and he got him. Like they took him out. So I would say very slim chance. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think the chances of a coup against Putin are somewhat slim. I'm thinking that his power is fairly consolidated at this point, and he's pretty much going to have to go out like Stalin. He's going to have to probably die from a stroke or get assassinated, really, for him to be removed from power at this point. I don't think there will be a coup that will successfully remove him while he's alive. So I think it's going to have to be a Stalin kind of an ending to this thing. And so with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. Great question, by the way, JC Atkins. And thank you once again for being our favorite LSA Navy NCO and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, really quickly, folks, I've been seeing some people tonight, I wanted to address this really quickly, because I keep on seeing like sporadic comments, because I think people are making it to this point in the video where that map was shown off, and a lot of people were like, wow, that's a great map. And I thank y'all for the kind words. I saw an overflowing of support for the map. So I will make sure to keep working on it, and hopefully I'll be able to release the first one in not too long from now. I don't know when that'll be. It's probably going to be a couple of weeks, to be entirely honest with y'all. It's going to take a while. But it should be out sometime soon. I think, though, folks, I'm probably going to end up putting it on Patreon, at least for most access, because these things are taking an incredibly long amount of time to make. Like, just for an example today, what was on the map was only showing combatant commands, which is the most basic element of the military, the most abstract sort of a managerial level, and then about 60% of all of the forces under EUCOM's area of responsibility. Wasn't even showing all of them. And it took about 7 hours to get to that point today. So it's most likely going to be put on Patreon for that reason, and also will help to support the project, so that way I could try and put some more effort into it, and maybe try and make a separate interface for that. But I don't know if that'll be possible. It most likely will just be a standalone map. So with that, I hope that does address that well. I wanted to address that really quickly because I saw a lot of people talking about it. And I was like, hey, well, I'd love to know that a lot of people really do like the map. And hopefully we'll be able to get it on out there, because it does look pretty cool. And I was messing around with some stuff in it, and we made it look as militaristic as possible. And I was like, man, I gotta show this thing to the folks. And also I gotta do a little bit more testing with it as well, because generally I can't make it like a tutorial thing where it's like a point and click video game style interface, which is what it would be in the best case scenario. So I kind of have to make it to where y'all can read your way through it if you don't know anything about the military, because the concept behind the map is that I can use it for cross-reference on air whenever we need to, like in the specific details, like use it to pinpoint something information-wise. But it also is made in a secondary objective for random people to be able to look at it and just, wander around it and learn more about the military. So I want to make it to where, while I can also use it to cross-reference, it also would be straightforward for y'all, even if you don't know anything about how the military is structured or operate, to be able to work your way up and down the command structure from the brigade level all the way up to the Department of Defense and back, if y'all wanted to, and make it all make sense. So that's also something I have to kind of test out with folks and see if it makes sense in its current form right now, or whether it could use some tweaking and improvement with how it's handling that side of things. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, AMX10, as well, for that support. And he said, live chat question, please. And we shall grab one, good sir. And thank you very much once again for that support. And the live chat question is going to go to Thomas D'Orazio. He said, do you have any idea of what the range of those fiber optic drones are?
Generally, we understand them to be about 15 miles at the maximum range, 15 to 20 or so. So that seems to be about their maximum range from what we can ascertain at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, also, by the way, that's only the biggest fiber optic drones with the largest spools. Most of them can only get about 3 to 5 miles, but some of the longer range ones can get to 15. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Old Warrior. And also, by the way, I want to say this real quick before we get to Old Warrior super chat. Some people are saying the map makes them uneasy. The map is totally based off of publicly available information. So you can search this up with a Google search. There is nothing on there except for that. So it's all publicly available, just to make that perfectly clear. And all this stuff you can literally find by doing a simple Google search. It's just consolidated in one place. That's the only difference. So just to make that clear.
Really quickly, I kind of want to show the proof behind the pudding because I don't want people to think like it's something that's super secret or anything like that. It's quite truly all from open source information on the internet. So, for example, just to show the map, like the process that's been going on to make this thing happen. So how I worked it is that I just went and looked at EUCOM's area of responsibility, looked at the forces directly under its command, and started from there and started working my way out. So the first thing that went on the map is the U.S. Army of Europe and Africa. Then I went and looked at all of the forces under its command, under a force map. So to show y'all what I was working with today, U.S. Army, Europe, and Africa. So I went to this Wikipedia. I made sure to cross-check this. Wikipedia is a very decent source of this, and it doesn't appear that anything's wrong. So all of this is publicly available about this group. And then when you come down here, I've been using, for EUCOM today specifically, for the ground forces, this specific force map, which shows all of the forces that are currently inside of Europe. As far as the ones like the rotational divisions, considering that these are rotational divisions that are rotated out every single 9 months, there is nothing on this map that speaks about the actual divisions or brigades there or what unit they are. They're completely left blank. And even if I found, like, I did find some information online saying what units are there presently. Even at that, for operational security reasons, considering that this could be any brigade at any given time, there's no information provided. But permanently based units that are publicly stated to be based here, like, for example, the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade, there is a lot of information provided about them because there's a lot publicly available. So all of the stuff right here, listed under the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade, it's permanent basing, it's publicly accessible, anyone can know that it's based in Ansbach in Germany, and also everyone can publicly hear that it has AH-64E Apaches, and also all the battalions that are under the brigade's command. So all of this is publicly accessible. It's just that as far as the map goes, it's taking something like this force structure map and putting it onto...
It's just consolidating it.
Yeah, it's really just consolidating it and making it a lot more cool to look at, and also visually showing where these things are on a map. So it's all publicly accessible. Nothing about this is sensitive or giving anyone an upper hand out there in the world. Like the Russians and the Chinese, they know all of this stuff about all of this already, and probably a lot more than I'm even putting on the map. So there's nothing operational security-wise that makes this thing a threat or an issue. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least the best I can at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Old Warrior, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, as well, for that support. He said, grab a chat. I got nothing tonight, but a big CD matured this morning. Oh, very nice, by the way.
Nice.
I would imagine you had a nice, juicy interest rate on that, too, because I believe the interest rates were doing quite good if you got that 12 months ago or 6 months ago or something. So congrats on that, by the way. Not that it's not like a participation trophy or anything like that. It was going to mature anyway. But thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that support. And grabbing that chat question, this one is going to go to Carters, who said, what will it take for Ukraine to go on another major offensive and take back big tracts of land?
I think it's going to take a lot more material support than they're getting right now from Europe and the United States combined for them to be able to conduct that kind of an offensive. So that's personally what I would be thinking. And so with that, a massive thanks to you once again for support, Old Warrior, and sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plant Lord, who puts in a 10. And Plant Lord said, do we have any idea what Ukraine has for defense in the north and Kyiv specifically?
We don't know exactly at the moment. At least I wouldn't. I think, yeah, the deep state map doesn't show it, and also a lot of the maps that used to amalgamate that information stopped about at the beginning of this year. So we actually do not know the exact force disposition of the Ukrainians in that area right now. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And, excuse me, goodness. Our next one here goes to Steve T, who puts in at 20. And thank you very much, Steve, as well for that support. He said, do you think flying cheap drones into Moscow could move Russia to alter production to produce defensive missiles at the cost of offensive ones and still hitting fuel, but to reduce Russian offensive capabilities?
Generally, we've seen that a large amount of Ukrainian attacks have been conducted on Moscow, and it doesn't really appear to have shifted their manufacturing priorities. It still appears that they are manufacturing the same amount of everything still, and are just praying that the Moscow air defense perimeter holds. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And if it does, that's good for them in their mind. But they're not really changing much of anything about how they're going about their day-to-day manufacturing because of that. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. Steve, great question, by the way. But generally, I think that the outcome of the attacks on Moscow are generally not doing a lot to change Russian decision-making, at least for now. But a massive thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Duncan VR, another channel legend, by the way. He puts in a 14 Australian, all the way from Australia. We got a lot of Australians in the chat tonight. And Duncan said, Enforcer, what is President T saying? And what is the horse going out of a window? It's marmot time again.
Marmot time. It's marmot time, everyone. Now let me go grab that marmot really quickly. Ah, yes, I see you know your marmot well. Good one. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my limp tail? Oh, there he is. Oh, hello there.
Oh, hello there, Governor. He's on the screen now. Hello there, Governor. Welcome back to Big Fat Fur. Yes, that's right. Big Fat Fur. Also, look at that tail. Look at that. I mean, how can you not like tail? But anyways, let's get a nice hat on this fellow right here. He's always right. Yeah, he's always right. Two more plums. Just in 2 more plums, we'll know if it's a good plum or not. Also, we'll know who's at fault. Is it the fly? Is he at fault? Or is it the rock? Is he at fault? It's a damn shame. One's an inanimate object and one's a real one. We don't know, though. We're going to pretend ignorance. We don't know about who's at fault here. You know, they're telling me. I'm hearing. But what say the fly?
Aw, man, I lost another hundo. Oh, God. Aw, man, it's pain and suffering for me. Aw, man.
Maybe in 2 more weeks we'll see another hundo go away, Governor.
Oh, God, no. I'm working in a shell already. But anyways.
Living in a shell too, eh, Governor?
But anyways, it's the marmot and the fly. We have to have the marmot and the fly. And I got to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Duncan VR. And I hope you enjoyed the marmot and the fly segment. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And moving on to our next one here. This one is going to go to none other than, guess what? It is the return of a channel legend. It is LSA Rocks who puts in the 50. And thank you very much, LSA Rocks, for that support, by the way. It has been a minute. And thank you very much for that, by the way. Very generous. And it's good to see you once again. And he said, marmot, and all exclamation points.
Hey, we had the marmot tonight. And I got to thank you massively for the support, LSA Rocks, because you are helping us to be able to see the marmot on air again. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again for that incredible support and helping us to keep this channel running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make this channel possible. And we still wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next one here, we are jumping into a 20 from Mr. Falcon. And thank you very much, Mr. Falcon, as well, for that support. And he said, hello there. I've been watching for a while, and I have an important question. Would you rather have unlimited bacon, but no games, or games unlimited game and no games?
So anyway, the option is just no games either way.
You're not getting games either way. You must hate video games.
You're not gaming, damn it. Like I would say, I would
I think he
say
meant to say bacon. I think he meant to say bacon, that last part, though. I think he accidentally typed games again.
I would say unlimited games and no bacon because I really don't have a lot of bacon as it is right now, so it's not really hurting me too much. But I do play video games from time to time to mentally relax the brain and to get it ready to go through another 3.5 hour monologue the next day, which is mentally exhausting. And I really found that out today because after doing like 7 hours of that map and trying to map that whole thing out, I started working on this and I was like, oh damn, I'm actually mentally exhausted. Like I realized I forgot how much mental effort this thing takes. It's a lot. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Carter's MG, and Carter's put in a 20, and thank you very much, Carter's, for that support, by the way. He said, thanks for taking mine from the general chat, and also no problem, by the way. And he said, take another from general chat.
Oh, well, we're more than happy to take some from the live chat. But no, you don't have to pay to have a question and answer here. We're more than happy to answer live chats. But I do thank you massively for the support. We will make sure to get a live chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Honestly, he's doing that pay it forward thing like they like to do on those fast food lines. Really not fast food lines. I've never seen that anywhere but like at Starbucks or something like that. You know, somebody will like pay for the person's thing in front of them or something like that. I've seen that happen in real life one time. He's basically doing that right there with a chat. So Carter's, we're grabbing that live chat right now, which goes to none other than Knox Date. And Knox said, could we see Ukraine attack during the exercise? And would Russia lash out and attack both Ukraine and NATO at the same time?
It's possible the Ukrainians could attack during the military exercise, especially if it's quite large and diverting a great deal of forces away from possibly responding to Ukraine. And if that happened, technically Russia would probably invade NATO if that was their plan, while also ending up having to lash out at Ukraine at the same time. That most likely would happen. And so with that, I hope that is addressed to the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to, guess who? It is LC39A. Once again, he throws in yet another massive support, this time a $139 support.
Damn!
So thank you very much, LC39A. Damn, okay. This one goes to him, and once again, that threw me off guard right there, man. That was crazy. That scared the hell out of me, man. That was loud in the headphones. But LC39A said, Russia quit Afghanistan, and how many losses and years did the fight?
That is a great question, LC39A. The Soviet Union fought in Afghanistan for 10 years, with 14,000 soldiers dying over 10 years. And then they eventually quit. So they kind of have already excelled the Afghan war in Ukraine by a great deal. Because if we even assume that out of the 1,100,000 soldiers that have been casualties at this point, that only 250,000 of them are dead and the rest are wounded, that still is leaps and bounds away from the amount of losses they took in Afghanistan. So that is the answer. 10 years and 14,000 dead. Nowhere close to the war in Ukraine, which is already grinding on towards its 5th year here soon, and it's already gotten about 1.1 million casualties, including most likely about 300,000 killed. So a big thanks to you for the massive support once again, LC39A, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next one here. This one goes to John McIver, and thank you very much, John, as well for that support. He said, has there been any military operations markings been seen on any vehicles allegedly for the buildup for the exercises in Belarus?
We haven't really been able to see a lot of pictures or videos of those forces, at least within that area, so we wouldn't know. So unfortunately, we have to declare ignorance on that, at least for the moment, John McIver. I hate to tell you that, but once we get some information, we'll be able to say it clearly, but at the moment, we haven't been able to get any picture or video evidence from that area to be able to tell. But a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to James Hughes, and James puts in a 10. And thank you, James, as well. He said, hello, enforcers. And do you think either side is tunneled underneath the Dnipro River? And if Ukraine would do it, they should make it deep and wide enough to get armor through it.
I would generally say they probably have not, because tunneling under the Dnipro River would be a pretty significant length. Even at some of the most narrow areas, they would have to tunnel about 3 miles to be able to just get to the other side of the river. And that would take a lot of time, and on top of that, there really is no way to hide the opening to the tunnel because both sides are on a flat, open plain, so any recon drone would see the hole, and they would be able to start attacking it and pretty much trap any one side or possibly kill them all. So I would say that there hasn't been any tunnels. I doubt that there ever will be, really. And if they were ever dug, they probably would not be large enough to fit a tank, because that would take a tunnel boring machine most likely, and those are incredibly expensive, incredibly difficult to move, incredibly difficult to set up, especially in combat conditions, and incredibly loud. So the Russians would probably start to hear that thing once it made it onto their side of the river. They'd hear underground boom, 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 boom. They'd be like, what the hell is that? And then they'd start to get an idea what it might be. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next one, this one goes to Bungus, and Bungus puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Bungus, as well for that support. He said, do you guys think, after having live leak level videos plastered all over the internet of the current Ukraine war, will have lasting effects on the next generation? And I would say yes, Bungus, it is going to have effects. That is something that we've been aware of the entire time we've been having to view those videos. We try to protect ourselves from watching as many as possible because it does have real effects. Now, whether or not it has the same effect as real life exposure to the stuff, that is not really known. There's not too many studies on it, but I would assume it's not as serious as being exposed to it in real life. But it must have some effect, though, because you're literally seeing the same type of imagery, but you're seeing it through a screen instead of through your own eyes in real life. So it probably will have a problem later on. We'll have to wait and see. We might be the study living here in real life. We might get to find out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, at least from what I would know, I don't really think it'll have that much of it. Well, I think it might, because a lot of Gen Z kids used to watch, yeah, there's really no way to say it rather than just saying it. I mean, a lot of Gen Z kids that I knew growing up in school, they would just, hop on their phone and there'd be like a cartel execution video, uncensored, unfiltered on their phone. And it didn't really seem to bother them all too much. And I don't really think it scarred any of them too much. But certainly bizarre that the people just kind of have access to that sort of stuff, like at all. But I would say that it's probably going to have a little bit of an effect. I don't think it's going to be that big. But some effect to some extent. It's just that we don't really know how bad it would be. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that this addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I can tell you for a fact some immediate effects of it. Now, for me personally, and hopefully this doesn't reflect badly on me, because I'm just being perfectly honest here, I don't really have any nightmares from seeing anything I've seen. I can't say anything, I can't report anything like that. The only thing that I can say is it has caused a bit of desensitization. So, for example, when I see that footage, I used to have a much more, I guess you say, visceral reaction to it. It still bothers me when I see something bad, but it doesn't cause the same visceral reaction it used to cause. Which is, I'm not really sure if that's going to have like some type of effect later on down the line or what, but we'll find out. But basically, that's the answer. We'll find out, I guess, later on. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one's going to go to Duncan VR yet again, and he puts in an 11. And thank you very much, Duncan, as well for that support. He said, "How about some Orange Voice impersonations?" Blah blah.
I gotta thank you greatly for the support, Duncan. Greatly for the support. I gotta say that your support is absolutely great. Nobody gives better support than Duncan VR. Great support, wonderful support. People have been going, sir, he gives the greatest support. Some of the greatest, some of the grandest. And why not? He does give the greatest. Nobody can refuse. And there's no such thing as a list. But nevertheless, a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Duncan VR. Because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and keep it running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next one here. Also, by the way, I want to say this as well, because some people were talking about video games desensitizing people. I think video games do desensitize people, but the argument that's been made in the past that, for example, if teenagers play games that tend to incorporate violence, like, for example, Grand Theft Auto is a popular one that people like to cite. They say if teenagers are exposed to that, then they'll be more prone to violence. I can tell you just from seeing, I also was exposed to what you call violent video games when I was a teenager as well. I'm not prone to violence, obviously. I'm a law-abiding citizen, so it hasn't had that effect on me. Maybe it has that effect on some, but also I've seen really terrible war footage that we've had to sort through for our stream and things like that, and also for the coverage to know what's going on. And I've also not been prone to violence either then. So I would say it may desensitize people, but it doesn't make you more prone to violence. That's at least my assumption. But I'm not a psychologist, so I couldn't tell you. But it hasn't had that effect on me. I haven't wanted to start punching stuff just because I've seen some war footage. But Enforcer, what about you? Have you had the urge to punch?
No, man, that sounds like some Theo Von shit right there. Man, I saw some of those people; they were willing to punch. Like I was like, bro. But anyways, beyond that though, I would have to say, I don't really think so because here's my take, folks. So were the kids back then like really calm and demure because they only happened to see some lynchings and public hangings here and there, like which was a pretty common thing back then for that to be public? Like were they desensitized? I'd say that there's a greater argument they were more desensitized than anyone would be now because when we see that kind of stuff, it's fiction. Hearing someone's neck snap in front of you from a noose because they're being hung in front of the whole town, I have a feeling that desensitizes you a lot more because that's real. Or better yet, all of the kids that lived through in mainland Europe through World War II, with the whole continent being touched by the war at some point, and them seeing some level of death in real life, or better yet, real life war and the atrocities to follow. Like that, I feel like that would have desensitized a lot of people. Doesn't really seem like a lot of Europeans, but it seems like a lot of Europeans were more against violence because they saw it as kids growing up in the Second World War. Like, to be entirely honest, like there's a load, like for example, another example, when most everyone lives on farms back in the day, back before the Industrial Revolution, 90% of people lived on farms. Slaughtering animals was a pretty normal part of being on the farm. Just take a sharp object to, a cow or a pig, take the thing out and start cooking it. I mean, that didn't really seem to desensitize people all too much. When you think about it, people have always had to deal with some sort of brutality at some point through their lives. Like, honestly, I feel like more people are more detached from it now. And I'll be honest, I would actually say it's more of an inverse effect. Having people see a fictional depiction of violence or graphic imagery is probably less so the case than really seeing something like that. Because when you really see something like that, it actually sticks with you and you learn a bit of a lesson. Like, damn, it's pretty bad to be hung, or pretty bad to be lynched, or pretty bad to have anything bad happen to you, or to live through a war. It seems that it imprints on people, this is a bad thing. When people see it in fiction, it's just a thing. Like, it's not bad, it's not good. It's just a thing. You can like it or dislike it. It doesn't really matter. So I'd be entirely honest. I think that video games really aren't desensitizing to people to violence or graphic imagery. I think it's more so just fictionalizing it to the point it's not inherently good or bad. It's just a thing, and you can happen to like it or dislike it at your own whim.
I think that is the case because, like, for example, if I see something bad now, like, for example, something of like violence, like, and we've seen like literally war crimes committed. The Russians commit war crimes and they record it. That's the nasty thing that they do. They record them and they put them online because they're proud of it, which is really sick. But the few that we've had to see, because we just happened to stumble across them while gathering the news, we can't describe them obviously, but you see it and you're like, oh gosh, you're like, that's bad. That's really bad. The next time you see it, you may not have that oh my God, like you may not have that reaction, but you'll still look at it and be like, oh, that's still bad. Like you still think it's bad, but you just don't have that really strong reaction to it. You still know what it is, but the reaction is just tamped down a bit, which to me, honestly, some people make the argument that maybe the video games are intentionally violent because maybe that would make the young American male population more prone to be able to go into the military in a wartime scenario and not have that visceral reaction to, obviously in war you have a lot of death. Maybe they wouldn't have that reaction. Maybe they'd make better soldiers. That's what some people say. But I think that's a conspiracy theory.
I think it's more so a conspiracy theory. I mean, like if that's the argument, what were the gladiators for back then? People like the macabre. People likes a violent display here and there. Before that, there was boxing. People love to go watch boxing. And boxing back then wasn't boxing today. People got their teeth knocked out and were bleeding all over the place. Like that happens. Like when people sit there nowadays and go, "Oh, this boxing match, they were bleeding." It's like a little nick above the eyebrow. Like back then, people got their literal faces knocked off nearly in boxing by people like Jack Dempsey. Off. Yeah, crap like that. Like it was brutal back then. But nowadays it's not so much. And like people always have a fascination with that kind of stuff. Like people back then in Victorian era, even, which is like as far as like the strict moral rigidity of any era, the Victorian era is probably the most strictly rigidly moral sort of a theology, or well, not really theology, ideology, sort of a system that ever existed that I could say. They even were interested in the macabre. They would have little freak shows where they went and looked at freaks or anything weird and macabre. They would go and look like one of the most famous things actually in Paris during the Victorian era, Matthew, was a mortician's parlor, and they would drag bodies from wherever, floating down the Seine, all that stuff, and they plop them up like on literally on a platter, kind of like leaned at an angle, so that way people could walk into this mortician's office and take a look at the bodies and see if they can identify them. And nobody ended up identifying hardly any of these bodies. People would just go in there to go look at a dead body because they were just interested in what a dead body looked like.
That's kind of dark. That's wild for any age. I'll be honest with you. Even me being kind of desensitized, like sort of like bad sights at this point, I still wouldn't want to see that. Those people are a little bit out there.
Well, I mean, people are like that, man. Like if you sat there, like I can promise y'all something, folks. If you sat there to someone kindest, nicest person you ever seen, and you said, "Hey, a car crash happened outside, and someone's laying dead in the street," they would go, "Oh my God, I want to see it," and they go out there and go look at it. It's not like I can promise you, people would do that, man. I can promise you because
I think I've been around the wrong people.
No. Because back in the day, man, when they had public executions, like for example in Britain or in France, they would go, "We're hanging a man," and it was a public execution, and people wouldn't sit there and go, "Oh my God, how terrible!" They'd literally close down the whole town to go watch the hanging. Like that's how it was back then. People would be like,
I thought
"Damn."
they would like force them to go watch it in some places.
No, it was voluntary. People would go like when Marie Antoinette was beheaded. People actually brought handkerchiefs, like their most prized handkerchiefs, because after her head was cut off and her blood washed out onto the clapboards that made up the guillotine stand, they would walk up and they dip their handkerchiefs into the blood to have a souvenir of it. No one forced them to do that; they just did it. Like people are morbid like that. Like people have a morbid curiosity built into them, and it is really messed up when you think about it, and it's incredibly macabre. But that's just a fact of kind of the human nature of things, is that people kind of tend to be like that for some reason.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess. I don't really have that going on. I'll be honest with you. I don't have any desire to see anything too bad. If I have to be exposed to it, like for example, if it's like a situation where you're trying to help somebody or something like that, then I'm like, I don't care. But if it's something voluntary, I wouldn't voluntarily expose myself to something like that. I would probably say, no, thanks.
I mean, I wouldn't really want to see any of it either. But at the same time, Maddie, haven't you sat there? Because I know everyone's done this. Like this, at least this extent does exist in everyone. When someone gets hurt, like they get cut or something like that, they're like, "Oh my God, it's bad." Everyone always goes, "Well, let me see it." It doesn't matter if you can help them or not. You just want to see it.
Well, I would ask to see it just to let them know if they need to go to the hospital or not or something. I'd be like, is it really that deep or is it not? Just put a Band-Aid on it. That's the only reason I would ask to see it. I wouldn't ask to see it just to be like, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of blood, man. That's a lot of blood." I'd be like, no, I wouldn't be doing that.
Well, man, I mean, I bet you most people have ended up doing that at some point because you're like, "Well, what does it actually look like? Like what does their wound look like?" And a lot of people would ask about it for that reason. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Mark Ead. And Mark puts in a $30 donation, by the way. And thank you very much, Mark, as well, for that support. That is New Zealand monies right there, all the way from New Zealand. Thank you very much, Mark, as well. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible and keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the next thing. I see a lot of people agreeing with me, man. There's like a million people in the chat agreeing with me. Everyone does it. Everyone does it because everyone's always going to be interested. Like it's nothing to be ashamed of, but it's nothing to be proud of either. It's just kind of a fact of people, is that everyone's going to be like that. Because if we weren't like that, gladiator fights would have never been popular in Rome. You would have never seen that jousting tournaments would have been popular, or boxing, or anything that involves people getting hurt. Like boxing, people get hurt in boxing and MMA and all those sorts of sports, and yet they're still wildly popular because people will chuck out some money to go watch someone get hurt. It's just something interesting about it to people. But anyways,
well, what after the fascination of it though, like wears off, like somebody's already been exposed to it, like they're not going to then want to see it like a second or third time or something like that. Because honestly, me and the Enforcer have been exposed to quite a bit. Like we've unfortunately, been in the presence of a family member that did pass away, which was obviously, at the time very horrific. Like, first time you ever see that is horrific. and I'll be honest with you, that's one of those things that you never really forget. I don't want to see anything like that again. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure if people are like maybe different than that. I'm like, I personally would not want to see that.
Um, I mean, yeah, like to an extent, like I wouldn't want to go see a death, but I'll be honest, it was incredibly sad, but I didn't really find it to be extremely traumatic. Because speaking of that particular family member, which was our granddad, it kind of was just like he went to sleep, really. It wasn't anything extremely traumatic to me. I was like, that was like, I always expected death to be this violent thing. It just kind of like went to sleep and he was gone. And I was like, it was really sad he's gone, but at the same time, that wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like witnessing something like that.
Honestly, after you witness something of that nature, it really like changes your perspective on life a bit. Like it really does. But there's something about that is oddly, it's hard to describe it. If anybody's ever had to be in that situation, you'll understand what we're talking about or what I'm trying to say here. It's extremely odd. On one hand, it's extremely sad because obviously it's a sad event, but at the same time, though, there's something oddly, I don't know if the right word's peaceful or something about it. It's a weird circumstance. I'm not sure if it's the same way because of course that was a natural death. That was a hospital setting, things like that. But in a battlefield scenario, where obviously there's a lot more traumatic events happening, I'm not sure if it's like a whole different ball game in that type of scenario. If someone passes away in your presence, but it really does change your perspective on things. It really does because you really see life as, oh wow, this is really actually finite. Like it's not just a myth or something that people are dying. You actually saw it, which is really life changing to a certain degree.
Yeah, I would actually be honest with y'all. I think some of the worst things that I've seen, it haven't even been with this channel. One time I actually drove, this was like years ago, back when I was running the channel. I don't really think I mentioned this a lot, but I drove to Atlanta, Georgia. You remember this story, Matthew? And I was driving back, and there was a Dodge Charger, I think, or some sort of a car like that. It's one of those American muscle cars. But apparently it had gone like 100 miles an hour into the back of an 18-wheeler. And it was low enough, like the clearance of the Charger was low enough that little bar on the back of the 18-wheeler trailers, you know the one I'm talking about, folks, the one that is, like, let me go, back end of 53-foot trailer. Let me see if I can get y'all a picture of this. So that little bar right there, it was kind of like higher up than that, though, from what I remember. But anyways, somehow the car had actually lodged itself down there, or the trailer had been lifted up. But that bar, or at least this right here, I can't really remember which one it was, but it had pretty much taken the whole top of the car above the hood and just opened it up like a can opener. And the guy, like, you could clearly see, like, into the car because it stopped, like, halfway through the driver's side window. The guy had been, like, pretty much mostly decapitated, and one of his hands was just laying on the road, severed near the car. And I was like, damn. And, like, the police hadn't even gotten there yet. It had just happened, like, a little bit in front of me. I didn't see the wreck, but there wasn't any police there or anything yet. It just had happened. So I drove by. I was like, oh, my God. I was like, wow. That is really messed up, and just kept on driving. And I think I called you right after that, man. It's like, dang, man, some guy just died out here. And, like, I said something about it, but I didn't really say much. And, at that point, I was watching a million horrific things every day doing this. So it was just kind of all, it's like blending together. Like, well, damn, that was a real one. That wasn't one I saw on the internet. But outside of that,
Got you to call though. It did get a reaction out of you as you called.
well, yeah, I mean, like, it was just, you don't see that kind of thing a lot. So, it's like, damn, I need to call about that one and tell everyone about that because that was nuts. But
I saw worse than that actually a while back. I'm not trying to get too morbid here, so I'm not going to go into too many details about it. But where we live in Birmingham, there's like a huge interstate that connects like one part of the city and the suburb to the other part where we're kind of at. And going down the interstate one day, coming back from the grocery store, there was an individual that was somehow found themselves on the interstate, and they had been hit by a vehicle. And obviously not a good scene from that. Like it creates a bad scene on the road, obviously, without going into many details. But happened to drive by at the exact time this individual happened to find his way onto the road and had been hit. And then saw what my mother thought was a deer. It turns out that was not a deer, and I saw what it was. It was a man, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not good. And then a semi truck came along. I was like, oh God. I was like, that's not good either. And it went, obviously, that whole thing happened like that. So I tried to tell my mother the whole time, oh yeah, it was just a deer. Like, it's just, that's what it was. I knew exactly what it was. I wasn't trying to tell her about it so she wouldn't be traumatized by it, but just went on by and kept going. And she finally saw the news article. Because the news article was out about it. The police were investigating, trying to figure out what happened with it. Nobody really could figure out what happened. It was really weird. I suspect the man maybe ran onto the road. Not really sure though. But it was a whole news story, a whole thing. It was really terrible. I'm not sure if they even ever got the answer to that, what happened with that. But it was very gruesome, very, very terrible.
I think they did. I think it was something like the guy was walking down a shoulder, and I think it was some sort of a distracted semi truck driver veered off a little bit onto the side of the road and hit him, or something along those lines. But folks, like someone walking maybe at 3 miles an hour with a 75-mile-per-hour semi truck barreling down behind them at full speed, the results are, of course, less than great. They're horrendous. But that was what happened. It was right here at this Clover intersection, by the way. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew, was on 459.
Yeah, if you go back a little bit down this road toward the Costco area, all I can describe it as the Costco area, there's this bridge, yeah, right there. It literally happened about 10, 20 feet in front of this bridge that intersects the interstate.
Yeah, so that was what happened. But beyond that though, like some like Anthony was like, dang, y'all seen some horrible road accidents. Yeah, but it is what it is. It's a very unfortunate thing, but it is a fact of life that those things happen. Like I have some folks that I talk to that are firefighters, all those sorts of deals. They have stories like that endlessly. Like that's pretty much their job to deal with that sort of thing, and it is gruesome. But it's something like it's a very unfortunate and very sad fact of life that those sorts of things happen, tragedies like that. But at the same time, you can like I think about that. I think about that one thing I see in Atlanta, saw in Atlanta from time to time. I'm like, dang, that was messed up, poor guy. But it is what it is. There's not really a lot I could have done about it to change it. It happened. It's very sad, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it because what could I have done? There was nothing I could have done. I wasn't even up there to see it, and I wasn't even driving that guy's car, or that 18-wheeler for that matter. Yeah, like it was just something I happened to spectate in a sense and kind of just passed by and saw it. Wouldn't want to have seen it at all, and wouldn't want to see it again. But things like that happen from time to time, I suppose.
Honestly, we've seen some bad things. Like I'm sure now everybody's seen something horrible, but I feel like we've seen like a lot of bad things. Chris Bradford said, I ride motorcycles. I've seen a lot. I used to ride a motorcycle, and I used to go riding with a couple of buddies that used to have a motorcycle back where I used to live. And one of them got into a really bad motorcycle accident at one point because he was a little bit too on the speed side with the motorcycle, which I tried to warn him. I was like, you're going to get jacked up on that one day riding like that. He's like, oh, no, I know what I'm doing. Well, it turns out you didn't really know what he was doing, and he actually got in a pretty bad wreck. And that whole scene, that aftermath was bad. It was like a broke like arm, leg, face, kind of a little bit jacked up. Even though he's wearing a helmet, still got like a broken like cheekbone or something like that somehow. Not even sure how it's possible after wearing a helmet, but I guess if you hit hard enough, it's possible. But just a rough scene from that too. Luckily, the dude was wearing proper riding gear, so he didn't get road rash that bad, but broke a lot of bones, broke a lot of arm, leg, things like that. It's just rough. Motorcycles are basically death traps. Like I enjoy motorcycles, but at the same time, though, if you live in an area where people drive aggressively, probably not the wisest thing. And also, if you have a family, definitely don't ride a motorcycle because you're literally going to have your wife, your girlfriend, or whatever in terror constantly, wondering if you're going to go and get killed one day on it because it's just a death trap.
Yeah, and also there, like really honestly, a lot of what we ended up kind of like growing up around was a little crazy because Matthew and me, I think at this point can list off a handful of friends that, or people at least we knew from high school that ended up like getting shot, nearly killed, all of that weird stuff. Like a lot of stuff like that happened around our area. Don't know why. Well, I know why, but it was an interesting sort of a thing. I saw someone all night long in the chat going, "Oh, the enforcers, they don't have any trauma. They lived a sheltered life." It's like I don't really think I have any trauma, but sheltered life, was not the case at all. Like the only person I could say living a sheltered life wouldn't have been us in our family, or really everyone else was living a sheltered life but us. I mean, we had to go to a public school, like everyone else, like generally anywhere that we were in our house, you know, it was like living like anyone else. Furniture was like 40 years old, 30 years old, stuff like that. You know, there was very little, like there was very little in the way of amenities, at least on our end to some extent. And you know, we generally got shit on at school because we were looked at as the kid, like we like for our area we were looked at as the rich kids, although we didn't really live like that at all. And so we got beat up, well, not really beat up, but picked on at school.
I wasn't getting beat up.
Well, not beat up, but we got picked on at school, picked on at home. It was a whole thing, you know, that's how it was. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. But Anthony Wilson, you're right. It's a good reason to have more trains. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in an 8. And thank you very much, Margaret, as well for that support. Margaret said, fun fact, adult pacifiers have become a viral stress relief trend amongst young people in China. And I see their army sucking on the front line. Live chat question.
Oh, that was a good one. I like that one, Margaret. Thank you for the support. I love that one. That was a good one-liner right there. All right, I got to thank you so much for the support. We will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question here goes to none other than Avari Mandabratis, who said, what if the U.S. told Putin we will set up a no-fly zone over Ukrainian airspace in 60 days with air forces we will base in Ukraine along with ground and air defense and no negotiation?
That would pretty much be the start of World War III, most likely. If we're not negotiating with them and we're just doing it, we would probably get directly involved in an armed conflict. So it's a good idea, at least in theory, if our crash course is to get into a third world war at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and sponsoring a live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to Detroit Adam, who puts in a 5, by the way, and also Boba Vasquez and Espen Turgenhagen for each putting in a 5 as well, and they said LSA.
And LSA, baby. And a big thanks to all of y'all for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you folks are making it possible. And so with that, I gotta say, folks, it turned into therapy night here in the chat. A lot of people are bringing up all the stuff that was happening to them that was wild. A lot of people have honestly, I'll be honest with y'all, I think everyone always has a crazy story or a lot of crazy things that happen to them in their lives. But it's always, I think it's always important, at least in my opinion, to never let any crazy things define you and to still go out of your way to do what is right or to do what you think is right. Because I like, there's two types of people out there in the world. There's people, well, really there's only one type. Everyone's always had something bad happen to them in some extent, to some degree. But there's two types of people that respond to it. The people who don't let that define them and they become who they want to be, or the people who let that define them and then they pretty much live the rest of their lives trying to pretty much find a way to make sense of it when there really isn't a lot of way to make sense of it. Like, you know, we don't get into everything that happened in our lives. Like, there's plenty of stuff we just don't mention because it's something that we don't really want to make everyone's thing or problem or let everyone know. But generally, as far as I look at it, it was what it was. It just got to move on, got to keep moving, because if you don't keep moving, the demons, they'll eat you alive. So it's just best to keep on moving and not dwell on it for too long, because it'll get you if you think on it. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Kachulian, as well, for that support. He said, I'm going to say it based on what we're seeing in Ukraine. I think they are currently the most advanced country in the world in warfare doctrine right now. And as for why we may have better tech, but doctrine-wise, we're behind the curve because we never fought a war like this, even in Afghanistan. And we need new tactics and training soldiers. And we're going to have to treat every dugout as a threat and to doing that, and also be paranoid about above them.
I would have to agree with you, at least for drone warfare. I would certainly have to say that is the case, at least in my opinion. I think that we need to rapidly evolve, and Ukraine is at the forefront of drone technology globally right now. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 once again from Kachulian343. And they said, on the note of the Korean War, I need you guys to Google a horse called Sergeant Reckless and take a quick gander. And also, the fat electrician made a video.
And I thank you for the support. Let's take a look at that Sergeant Reckless. Let's take a look at him. It was a horse, and he was reckless.
Look at him. Sergeant Reckless right there. Look at him.
1st Marine Division. He's a Marine. But anyways, beyond that, they bought him for $3,000 in 2024 figures. So not that expensive, kind of cheap. But let's see here. Let's take a little gander here. And during the battle for Outpost Vegas, made 51 solo trips to resupply multiple frontline units, and was wounded twice in combat, and given the battlefield rank of corporal, and then a battlefield promotion to sergeant in 1954. Wow, that's pretty cool, actually. I did not know about this horse, me personally. I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. That's a really neat kind of a story to hear about. And I got to thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Luke UK, who puts it a 5. And Luke said, hello, Enforcers, and hello, LSA. I just want to thank Enforcer Matt for all the fantastic hard work.
And thank you for enjoying our hard work. We love to know that folks do, Luke UK, and I got to thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping her to keep on rolling. And we're on to the next one.
And we have one from Cynical Signatic, who puts in a 5. They said, didn't the Russians tell their troops in 2022 that they were doing a training exercise? And it seems similar to what's going on there in Lithuania right now.
Exactly, Cynical. That's what I'm saying. We have to take it that way because that's the exact point I'm saying. Like, how do we know it's not that? How do we know? We thought it was not that when the invasion of Ukraine started in 2022, and it did turn out to be an armed invasion. So that's why we have to always treat all these war games like armed invasions. Otherwise, they can pull a fast one like that. I entirely agree with you right there. That's hitting it dead on the nail. So a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Burby, who puts in the 5. And Burby said, I think people are just sick of war and history, and it seems to be repeating itself. And scary times, man, and love the content. Hermanos.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Burby. And I gotta say, it is scary times, but hopefully we'll make it through better than the last. I hope. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Torsten Hawk, who puts in a 5. And Torsten said, if anyone believes that Russia is the friend of the U.S. because of social media, need good health insurance because MREs are expensive.
I'd agree with you, Torsten Hawk. I agree with you on that. Wise words, wise words. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from El Kuva. And El Kuva said, does Russia control part of what would be one China?
No, actually. The Communist Chinese actually do not claim any part of the Russian Federation, rather than some insignificant islands within the Amur River, which the Amur River is the little river here that demarks the border between Russia and China. So beyond a few of those tiny little islands that aren't even populated, no other greater part of Russian territory is considered to be a part of Communist China's greater territorial ambitions. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to NK Production, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, NK, as well, for that support. They said, Kim here. Hello there, Kim. How you doing?
Hello there.
He said, who are your parents? Just wondering, because they did such a good job of raising such intelligent gentlemen with love from North Korea. That's a very long story, good sir, right there, Kim Jong-un. And also, don't you have intelligence capabilities to learn that information, good sir? I thought North Korea had the best intelligence services. But seriously, though, that's a very long story right there, and a very complex story, to say the least. Maybe one day, if the channel grows large enough, maybe we will write a book one day, maybe, and everybody can read about the story. But it's such a long story, I just can't even get into it, such a long story. But good question. Then, Enforcer, what say you?
Oh. It's a long one. It's a very long one. I do thank you for the support and the kind words, though. I thank you for the compliment. But it is a story that I think we would have to say for an autobiography or something like that at some point, because it is certainly not a straightforward one. And so with that, a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Krogan, and he puts in a 4 and says LSA.
Hey, and LSA. A big thanks to you so much once again for support, Robert Krogan, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plazoth and Robert Krogan, and they each put in a 3 without a comment. But thank you very much, Plazoth and Robert, once again for that support. We also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, and he said, LSA the like button, that's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. And I gotta say, an amazing thanks to you so much once again for always supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Michael Tripto. He puts in a 2 and says, I love the map, just do not the information.
And I thank you for support, Michael Tripto. And the map is made entirely off of publicly accessible information. It's just putting that all into a way where it's depicted on a map. Kind of like how we've been doing on our normal map about the really news from around the world. None of it's extremely sensitive. It's already out there publicly, every single clip. Very seldom ever do we have really the drop on anything, and if we have the drop on anything, it's because we just happen to get to publicly accessible information quicker than most other people. So I do thank you for the support, Michael, but I can assure you that the Global Force Disposition Map is working entirely off of publicly accessible information that can be found pretty much through a Wikipedia search or finding any book that the Army has published itself on how its forces are organized and spread out across the globe, along with the Navy, the Air Force, and all of the other branches of the armed services as well. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Bruce Lee. And thank you very much, Bruce Lee, for that $2 support. I do not see a comment to address, but we do appreciate that very much. And Bruce Lee, you are bringing us right into our live chat segment. It is now that time of the night. We have addressed all of our super chats, and it's now time to get some live chat questions and see what everybody in the live chat had to say. And it looks like we've got some good ones. But first of all, let's grab our Morse code decoders of the night. We had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Aaron Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, and Copilaterix. They said the Morse says Ukraine is now pushing Russia away from Pokrovsk itself. Russia is weak. LTLSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all hit the jackpot. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly in the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for continuing to get that correct time and time again. It's truly an amazing and profound thing that y'all can get that correct that many nights in a row. 1,276 days specifically. And I've got to congratulate you all greatly on that. And so with that, it's time for us to move on into the live chat questions. We're going to be answering live chat questions until we reach 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time, or if you're looking at our screen here on the computer, 12:30 a.m. Central Time. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
Newman, your front lines are weak. They're feeble. Ukraine is not weak. You mock Ukraine. I wish we could pull that scene up and share that real quick. I don't know why, but it just popped in my mind for some reason. I think it was you said that Russia is weak or something that made me think of it.
Matthew, if I remember correctly, though, Matthew, wasn't it Kramer who sat there and said while he was playing that game of Risk, to rule Singapore, you have to have that iron in you?
No, he didn't say that. He said your lines are weak. They're feeble. Ukraine's front lines are on the collapse. They're going to fall. And then that Ukrainian guy, yelled out from the corner or whatever and smashed his board or whatever. I think he was playing it with Newman.
Yeah, he was, man. He was Kramer was saying there. Hang on. Kramer was like, "You better give up. It's all falling apart." And Newman said, "Not quite. I still have forces in the Ukraine." And then Kramer said, but the Ukraine, it's weak. It's feeble." And then the Ukrainian said, "You don't say Ukraine is not weak. Ukraine is strong. Hey, look, guy, we're playing a game. To take your board and smash it to pieces." And he, slammed his fist right into the board and flung all the pieces everywhere.
I tell you what, Kramer was pushing that Russian propaganda, and Newman was actually on the right side.
Hello, Jerry. Hello, Newman. But anyways, with that, I gotta be honest with you, man. That clip, it aged like fine wine. And honestly, the whole Seinfeld show did. I think it's still a great sitcom. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the live chat questions. What do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so this one goes to Fayuma, who said, have the Baltic states already issued enough gas masks on the border with Belarus and Russia, as there will be soon lots of smelly orcs on the doorstep?
Oh, I have not heard about that yet. Lithuania said they're going to be conducting a little military exercise on the other side of the border as the Zapad is going on, but we haven't heard of the issuance of gas masks. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, if Belarus does try an incursion into Ukraine, does Ukraine have the manpower to repel them?
Yes, I would generally believe that they do have the strategic reserve necessary to be able to repel a Russian offensive if it was to happen, because it couldn't be that large. The Russians are getting kind of a little stretched on manpower. And so with that, I hope that is addressed at will. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Canada is Sovereign, who said, do you think Russia's lack of gasoline adversely affects its ability to maintain its ground because it can't bring in logistics support?
Absolutely. Generally, when this sort of a deal happens, the front lines actually have to shrink back to wherever is closest to the railhead, the nearest one. So, yes, this actually will start to pose an issue, especially if this becomes a chronic problem, not just for the whole of Russia in the civilian sense, but in the military sense. This is going to start resulting in them losing ground because they'll no longer be able to match the maneuverability of the Ukrainian armed forces. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to a $5 super chat from Crispy. He threw in the 5 and he said, good job, and thank you very much, very nice. I thank you, Crispy, because we do a good job. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Joe Leslie, who said, I can only see pre-2022 numbers on Google for Russian troop numbers in Kaliningrad. Do you have any idea where I can find up-to-date troop numbers?
I wouldn't be able to cite the sources right off the top of my head, but there are people out there who are tabulating the current force dispositions of the Russians in Kaliningrad. It's just that unfortunately I wouldn't be able to tell you who those folks are off the top of my head, but their information is very sound. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Knox Date. And he said, if there was a big jump of Ukraine support here in the U.S., why haven't we become more aggressive against Russia or show that we are truly behind Ukraine?
It's because while the public might be heavily in support of Ukraine, that does not change who the president is and how his decision-making process works. It kind of just changes how America is viewing his decisions, really, more so, is the best way I could describe that sort of a dynamic. And so I hope that answers your question well. And also, before we round this thing out, we actually have a $10 super chat from Russ Rizzo. And Russ said, August 24th, Ukrainian Independence Day celebration, Dnipro 562, Janisse Street, St. Buffalo, New York. Well, actually, Janisse Street, Buffalo, New York, not St. Buffalo, New York. But a big thanks to you for the support, Russ Rizzo. And I got to say, that is great to hear about, and hopefully that will go incredibly well. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again massively for watching tonight. We reached the peak viewership of 13,000 live viewers. We are consistently in the top 50 in America every single night with our news coverage, or at least near to it. Got to put out that disclaimer. But we are still absolutely enthralled to have you all here. It's an honor to know that so many people are continuing to choose this channel to be their primary source of news. And we hope that y'all will join us all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And of course, if there is any major news in the middle of the day, Enforcer Matt will be making the short war summary. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, a big shout out to all 110,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will see all of you tomorrow on the stream again at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also on that midday short war video if there is enough news to cover. I'm not sure if there will be, so we'll have to see. But if there is one, I will be putting that out midday. But once again, a big shout out to everybody that was here tonight, and we will see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.
To